Good evening, everyone. I call to order the March 6th, 2023 business meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. We welcome everyone and request everyone in the audience to silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Ms. Wagner, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Bolton? Present. Mr. Craig?
Here.
Ms. Jones? Here. Dr. Moffitt? Mr. Morosky?
Here.
Mrs. Weinberg? Here. President Lindy?
Here. Members of the public online who wish to speak during hearing of the public this evening may do so by clicking the chat button now. That feature will be open for your requests for the next 5 minutes. Please submit your name, your affiliation, your school community, your topic, and your contact information if you would like a direct response to any question that you might have. We're going to move to item B on our agenda, which are our 3-month board priorities. And Rob, could you bring up the document? Great. So there are 5 of these 3-month priorities. For people who are tuning in for the first time or have not joined in a while, every 3 months we determine in advance as a board what are our 5 most important areas where we most want to see progress happen. And we provide periodic updates to ourselves and to the public about whether or not we're on track for getting each of those 3 to 5 priorities for where we'd like them to be. This most recent set was one that we discussed and ratified at our board working session in January, and we're going to provide our first of those updates to the public this evening. So if you look at the page that Rob has on the slide, and for people who are joining us here or online, this is the 3rd page of tonight's agenda. You'll see all 5 of those priorities going down the left side, and you will see on the right a more detailed description of where we want to be by the 1st of May. So I'm going to offer a very short reflection on the first one. I might ask my colleague, Ms. Bolton, if she would do the second. I might ask Mr. Morosky to do the 3rd. I might ask Ms. Any takers on number 4? Ms. Jones might ask you to do number 4 then, to offer a color. And then Mr. Craig might ask you on number 5. But what we've done in the past is provide either a green update, which means this is on track. Yellow, meaning it might be slightly off where we want it to be, but we think we could get there by May 1st. Red, meaning it's meaningfully off track. So we'll try to go through this as quick as we can. On number 1, by the 1st of May, we want to have conducted a mid-year review for the superintendent based on the valuation tool it adopted in October and based on mid-year data that the board received in advance. I think we are doing all of these things and are well on track to be where we need to be by May 1st. So from my perspective, that is green. Any disagreement on that one? Great. Rob, if you could make that green for folks who are viewing at home. And then we're going to have a second update here, I think, from Ms. Bolton.
Thank you very much. We're talking in terms of the strategic plan, and the board adopts a strategic plan for the next 3 years, and that's sort of in question, which includes an updated long-term vision, mission, and forecast informed by what we learn from our community, as well as a result of facilitated discussion with the community by a third-party vendor. I think actually I would say green from a standpoint that we have completed a major portion of the strategic plan by selecting and adopting unanimously our goals and guardrails, and also hopefully after tonight securing a third party to facilitate what we think is very, very important as well, and that is the community engagement for determining not just the goals and guardrails, which we've done previously now, but also the vision, mission, and as we call it, forecast or future for the district. So I think we're well in hand to be on schedule, and that means green for me.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Mr. Morosky, would you take us to number 3?
I'd love to. Thanks, President Lindy. So as policy committee chair, it is my pleasure to give us a failing grade because we haven't done that, but we will by May. So process-wise, we're on a green, but we have not done that. That has not happened. But it will happen by May. So you can give it whatever color you want. And stay tuned during my committee report because you will see why I'm very confident.
I think we can make that green, Mr. Morosky.
Let's do it.
It will
Let's
be
make
done
it
by
green.
May
I love
1st,
it.
then I think it doesn't cause for elevated
Thank you,
concern.
President Lindy.
Listen, last time we had purples and pinks and all kinds of other colors. So this is open to whatever creativity folks would like to bring. Ms. Jones, would you take us through number 4, please?
Thank you. On our transportation priority, everyone knows we've had major challenges this year. Won't repeat that, but we know it. And our administration is working on, preparing for next year and what changes need to be made. So the administration, the board will be reviewing the reports from the administration on options that we are considering for next year. And I want to add that the administration has held many roundtables and other efforts throughout the year to gather information from our constituents about transportations, and these conversations are forthcoming. And so I present that, and I forgot the colors, Ben. Yellow.
Yellow sounds great.
Thank you.
Last one, Board Superintendent Relations from Mr. Craig.
Yeah, so I think this one is the board and the superintendent will continue to develop and strengthen the working relationship. I would give this a yellow because I think this is a constant thing that we always will be working on and building towards having a better definition of what the board duties are, what the superintendent's duties are, and how we can work together to benefit our students in the class and in their student outcomes. And so I would give it a yellow at this point because I think we are working hard to continue to improve.
Thank you very much, Mr. Craig. So thanks all board members for reviewing these and for being a part of the work in setting them and in the subsequent board meetings. Is there anything anybody else would like to share on any of these priorities before we keep moving? I know Ms. Bolton might have a few things on transportation. We'll do those later. Anybody else? Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll do a shorter return to this at each meeting. It is a priority of mine to work as hard as I can to make sure we're spending most of our time on the items that most board members feel will make the biggest difference for students, for families, and for staff. So with that, we'll move to item C, which is our superintendent's update.
Thank you, Board President Lindy. Just a couple things really quickly. As a follow-up to our last board meeting, which I think was a week ago, was it last week, week before? We did some additional follow-up through email correspondence with the union and individuals that spoke at last month's meeting, specifically concerning the social workers and the school counselors. And as I shared in that correspondence, for those that were able to read that, one of the things that I really am pleased about is that our concern at this point is not around the need for the additional focus on the positions that we're talking about or on the areas that we're discussing. That we collectively believe that there is a need for us to focus more intimately and intensely on attendance, and there is the need for us to focus more intimately and intensely on graduation. And so that's really important, and that means that we are starting from the right place. I think the second, and there were several different areas that I did correspond with our union team around and the individuals that spoke last week. But I think the second is also recognizing that as we are going through our next steps and what those next steps look like, that we do operate under a staff allocation model, and that allocation model is based on projections. So when we think about overall projections for next year, right now, based on our projected numbers, we are projected to have an overall increase of our school guidance counselors, of our school counselors. We have two of our schools, and both are high schools, that we do need to take another look at, because based on their projections, their numbers are slated to be lower across the board than they are right now, which would cause them to not be projected as school counselor. Looking more intimately at each of those schools, one being the largest school in the district, the other being one of our more challenged schools in the district, we are looking at whether or not we're able to continue to support those resources there, because it is important. For one of the schools, through the appeals process, the initial level of appeals does come to administration. And through the appeals process, there were 3 positions that were asked for. One of those positions was granted back. And at that time, the school did not add back the school counselor. They added a different position instead. And so I think it's important for us to give another look in terms of that. And the third, I would think that is really, really important is recognizing that there is not a space at all where we as an administration, and I know that I have the support of the board when I say this, that we as an administration would look to reduce school counselors or school social workers. The work that they have to do in school buildings and that they are needed to do in school buildings, I'm talking across the board. The work that they have to do in school buildings, or the work that they're needed to do in school buildings, is just too great. But giving an opportunity for them to really focus intimately, and I used the term earlier, intensely, but for them to focus intimately on some of those other areas that right now they may not be able to focus the same way on. So we know that our school counselors and our social workers offer Tier 1 support for students around mental health support. Many of our school social workers also offer Tier 2 support, and many of them are poised to offer Tier 3 support. But it's challenging to do that with some of the other things that are on the plate. So I do feel confident that working in partnership with both CFT and CAS, because that's where the differences are right now in terms of the positions, that we will come to a determination on what is the right space. Because I am really overjoyed that the conversation is not about what the positions would be doing, why the positions would be doing that, but more the conversation is about whether or not the position is most appropriate as a school social worker, or as a school counselor, or as a graduation specialist, or as an attendance specialist. So those would be just areas that I would like to elevate in terms of those areas from feedback from our last meeting. The second thing that I do want to celebrate it was from this weekend, and I offer just overall kudos to our entire team for the work that they did around our launch of our recruitment event. On Friday night, we had a CPS Cincy event mixer at the Freedom Center. It was very well attended. We know the weather actually caused some individuals not to come out that day that had registered, but it was a wonderful experience. And there were many individuals that had participated earlier during the day in school tours, and they came out that night as well. So just to give a little bit of statistics around where we were in terms of our job fair, our goal was really to make sure that we were trying to reach our pre-pandemic numbers in terms of getting individuals out. This was the first time that we were able to do it at this level. And so our pre-pandemic numbers for job fair were 328 registered for the job fair. I'm pleased to share that at this job fair, we did exceed that. We had 372 that were registered. Of the 372, 340 were advanced registrations, and 32 of them actually registered the day of the fair. We had 32 job offers that were offered on the spot while we were there at the job fair on that day. And so, and of those, which I also found very interesting, is 15 of them were intervention specialists. And we know the intervention specialists are those that are working with our special needs populations. We were also able to offer some para positions at the fair as well. So we opened the fair up so that we had a cross-section of individuals that were there. But to see that we were also able to offer 8 civil service positions at that time as well is also a celebration. So I would just like for us to collectively just give a round of applause to the staff and all of our partners. CFT was with us on Friday night. They were with us on Saturday as well. All of our team members were there. This was led by our Office of Human Resources and Talent. So if we could give them a round of applause, that would be greatly appreciated. It will take all of us. So we hope that you have your shirts that show Ask Me How to Be Employed by Cincinnati Public Schools. It will take all of us, and it will take all of our events to make sure that, one, we are recruiting our staff members to come, but that we also really begin to have conversations around retaining our staff members as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. We'll move to item D, which is hearing of the public. Each speaker this evening will have 2 minutes and will direct all comments to the presiding officer. For people online, once a request to speak has been granted, you will be invited to enter. Please click on the camera icon to go interactive. Provide your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and your contact information if you'd like a direct response to any question you might have. This request is consistent with board protocol, and we appreciate your help. In the unusual event that someone is not willing to follow this protocol, we do reserve the right to end that person's time. Again, each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. When the timer goes off, your time is up. Please refrain from discussing any personnel items. After speaking, you will briefly see the welcome screen again as you transition back to the live stream meeting. Finally, we ask that your public commentary be respectful of all listeners. Thank you. Robert, Mr. Hoying, can you tell us how many speakers online we have this evening?
We have 2 speakers online.
Okay. So I think what we'll do is we'll have our in-person folks go first. We'll have the online people go second, and then we can have President Sellers go at the end. 2 last items here. We typically don't respond in the meeting to speakers at hearing of the public, sometimes because of time, sometimes because there's some follow-up work that needs to happen in order to provide a response. But we do ask for people's contact information so that we can provide that response. If you haven't received a response and asked for one, please do contact me directly via the board office. And then final piece, I mentioned this last week, but our board policy 0169 says that the presiding officer shall have the discretion to limit the total amount of time given to a single issue in the hearing of the public. For example, if the total amount of time devoted to one issue will exceed 30 minutes, the presiding officer will have the ability to limit the number of speakers on the topic or further limit the time each speaker is permitted to speak on that topic. What I'd like to do tonight is the same thing I offered at our last meeting, which is if any of the board members feel that we really have surpassed that threshold for a single issue, please speak up and make policy. And if a majority of board members would like to do that, then that's what we'll do. Wonderful. So I'm going to read the first 3 names. And if people could come down and be ready to go next, it'll help us make sure we get through everybody as thoughtfully as we can. Our first 3 speakers tonight are going to be Katie Hoffman, Renita Brooks, and Laura Moore. Our first speaker tonight is a representative on the Ohio State Board of Education.
Good evening, and thank you for having me this evening, board members and superintendent. November 8th, I got elected to the state school board, and I had no idea of how it would be impactful in my life and the lives of children here in Ohio, because the folks in our legislature are so afraid of me and the other people that got elected that they had to, during lame duck, and then the very first bill that went through the Senate was Senate Bill 1, to remove the power from the state school board. Kind of sad. Kind of sad that that's what they have to do, so because they are so afraid of we the people. Because we the people voted for the 11 electeds on the board. The 8 others are appointed by DeWine, and I just want to make sure you understand about the 8 appointees. We did some research and found this out. Those 8 appointees' names were sent to the Senate. The Senate refers them to the Education Committee. but the Education Committee does nothing with those names. So, if we have a resolution coming up next week, and one of those appointees doesn't vote the way they have been directed by the governor, then because they have not been confirmed by the Senate, they can remove them. It's a pretty dangerous precedent that they're setting, but that's what they're doing. But Senate Bill 1 is a very dangerous piece of legislation. It went through the Education Committee, and it also went through the Senate. And it's now over in the House, and they're going to start hearing opposition testimony next Tuesday. It's dangerous in two ways. Number one, it takes the will of the people away.
That was 2 minutes, so if you could, we want to give you a chance to finish, but I think that was our 2-minute timer.
In 1953, we, the people of Ohio, said they wanted the State Board of Education to be away from the governor. And this is basically, they want to go against the Constitution. The second thing is with this Senate Bill 1, I fear, and it's been supported by many educational advocates around the state, that this will take away local control. If the Czar of Education decides what you're going to teach, how you're going to teach it, what books you're going to use, and who you're going to teach, that's dangerous. That is what I'm mainly concerned about. So I gave you my card, so please stay in contact with me. There's some very dangerous bills coming up in the House, especially about 15, 16, and 17-year-olds being able to work longer hours in the evenings. That would really affect what you're talking about in those kids being able to get to school, attendance, and graduation. And that's a business concern. They want more workers, and so they're going to do it with kids. And you know that's a dangerous thing. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear from Renita Brooks, followed by Laura Moore, followed by Taria Calloway.
Good evening. I'm a school counselor in the district, and I am here to follow up on the conversation that occurred last week. I just wanted to promote the idea that school counselors be the graduation specialists and the social workers be the attendance specialists. As our specialties require, we all have master's degrees. Some of us have master's plus 30. Some of us are working on our doctorates, and we have one here that already has their doctorate. So I think that makes us specialists in a lot of ways. According to, and what we do around the district, being members of the My Tomorrow team that was disbanded this year, but we've worked very hard for the last 4 years prior to this year on graduation requirements, developing what local seals look like, training principals and other counselors on what it takes to meet the new state graduation requirements that took effect this year. We work with social workers district-wide on PBIS and the ESP curriculum councils, and so I think that makes us graduation specialists. We also, of course, attend to mental health with our students. We do short-term counseling. We work, many of us social workers and school counselors work on the mental health response team, which is the gaggle, where we're on call in the evenings and the weekends. Several of us social workers and school counselors do first aid mental health training for teachers and other staff in the district, and I think that makes us well-rounded. And so I just wanted to kind of just point out that I think we have enough of who we have in the district already to do everything that we need and that you guys are looking at or considering going forward. So we do have work to do. I really hope that we can work on bringing our ratios down for every school and watch us work, CPS school counselors and CPS social workers, if you guys want to stand up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Laura Moore, followed by Toria Calloway, followed by Michelle Thacker.
Good evening. I am an attendance support specialist. I work with social workers at Roselawn, Hartwell, and Woodward. And I was so glad to hear Superintendent Wright affirm the need in the district for social workers, because the social workers that I support work very hard with families in crisis, children in crisis, and they could not do all that if they did not have an attendance support specialist. At our last positive school culture meeting, we were told that there would not be attendance support specialists next year, and this new attendance specialist position seems to only apply to high schools. But the elementary schools will not be able to be in compliance with the law on attendance if they do not have their attendance support specialists. We do all of the paperwork, and if they had to do the paperwork on top of the meetings and the follow-ups with the families, I don't believe it could be done. They would have to choose between acting as secretaries full-time or servicing the students and the families at their school. And I think their number one priority has to be those students and families. My social workers deal with children as young as second grade who are thinking of committing suicide. They work with homeless families in connection with Project Connect. They provide so many services, and it would be a waste of those resources to expect them to do the secretarial work that's involved in attendance. And I feel that the high schools, if they could each have a full-time attendance support specialist, they could handle the work that they have to do as far as the meetings and serving their students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Toria Calloway, followed by Michelle Thacker, followed by Kendra Phelps.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Toria Calloway. I'm going to try to get through this without the tears. And I am an attendance support specialist. Not only am I an attendance support specialist, help with a little girl on Tuesdays and Wednesdays with a wheelchair. I'm at Rockdale on Wednesdays and Thursdays, I'm at Rockdale. Tuesdays and Friday, I am at South Avondale, and Monday, I am at Carson. I am so much more than just an attendance specialist. I'm a team player. Wherever they need me, I go. And I am just like really hurt the way I had to find out that I don't have a job next year. When you guys hired me, you asked me to be a professional. I have been nothing but that. So I just feel like the same respect that I gave you of being professional, I should be able to get it back. My son was in a 19-car pileup. He broke his hip, his leg, and his pelvis. I had just started. I couldn't take off from work because I had just started and I didn't want you guys to let me go. My family said, Troy, you got to go to work. We got this. So I didn't take FMLA. I went to work. The same day he was in the accident, I was at work. So I feel like I have given you guys the best that I have, but I'm getting nothing back. Some lady named Miss Hobson, bless her heart, she sent me an email. Didn't know who she was. I was at a meeting last month. Somebody said something about, no, there's no more. Nobody has told me if I have a job. I do a lot. Has anybody pulled up and see what our position is, what we do? You would be surprised how long it takes to do that. You know, and I just feel like, not just me, all of the attendance specialists, we go home wondering if we don't come the next.
Thank you very much. Have Michelle Thacker, followed by Kendra Phelps, followed by Tammy Fisher.
Good evening, Board. I am Michelle Thacker, Second Vice President for the Cincinnati Federation of Office Professionals, known as CFOP. I am before you today to advocate for the importance of keeping the attendance support specialist positions. I started in this district in 2019 as one of the original 19 attendance support specialists. At that time, it was newly formed, much needed, and created to assist the school-based social workers with serving our students with attendance-related concerns. While serving in this role, it was my understanding that it was my primary objective to ensure that all our students were in attendance during the day so that they could obtain the required education needed to be successful in life. Those efforts are achieved with collaboration with the social workers, making direct contact with parents and students, preparing and ensuring accuracy of paperwork for court, scheduling attendance intervention meetings, ensuring that all of our students' attendance records are accurately coded within PowerSchool on a daily basis. While the social workers are out in the field, there are daily tasks to be maintained. It is the collaborative efforts of the social workers and attendance support specialists that ensure that we as a district are compliant with the mandated attendance reporting for the state of Ohio. It is my strong belief that instead of eliminating the well-established joint efforts of the attendance support specialist with yet another administrative position, the high school specialist position should be an additional position under CFOP. Not doing this will be a disservice to our community and our students who would be negatively impacted the most. I respectfully ask that Superintendent Wright and the board reconsider disrupting the efforts that are continually and currently in place and working well with the betterment of our students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For Kendra Feltz, we're going to have Tammy Fisher, followed by Christy Watson.
Good evening, board members. I also ask you to think about the message that you're sending to our counselors and our school social workers when creating positions like the graduation and attendance specialists that deprofessionalize the important work that they do. Our students deserve better. So to make it clear, what we're asking you to do is to keep the attendance support specialists, hire more school social workers and counselors, so that we can indeed support our students with attendance and graduation. As a parent, I'm also bringing a concern that I have around the decision to have Withrow, Woodward, Walnut Hills, and Schroeder at one site for summer school. This is not well thought out or in the students' best interest. Why would you think that students who struggled in school year-long with a teacher would be best served being taught by a computer program instead of at their own high school with teachers who can address their misunderstandings? We got to do better. Thank you.
We have Tammy Fisher, followed by Christy Watson, followed by Jennifer Foster.
Good evening, board. Good evening, Superintendent Wright. My name is Tammy Fisher. I am a school counselor at Hughes High School, but I'm also co-chair of IOT. And I stand here with concerns regarding the Title I funding to support the new positions that are being created. The graduation specialist, the dean of students, and the attendance specialist. As a Title I school, I know that we have a great need for so many other things with our funding. And as a school counselor, where I'm already doing the duties that's laid out in the graduation specialist role, I help with some type of trauma-informed care or something with bringing in something for the retention of ninth graders will be better than adding additional positions for work that's already being created. But again, I do have concerns with our Title I funds being allocated for that. And as ILT co-chair, this budget item was never submitted to me myself, nor did our LSDMC vote on or approve our fundings for this. So that is my concern.
Thank you very much. We have Christy Watson, followed by Jennifer Foster, followed by Naomi Madaris.
Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Wright. My name is Christy Watson, and I'm a school counselor at Houston High School. I'm extremely proud of my job and proud to work with the amazing network of school counselors in the district. School counselors are an integral part of student success in and outside of the classroom. We provide mental health support, academic planning, college career mapping, and so much more. And as mental health needs for students continue to rise and wait lists for therapy services are typically months long, I don't see how cutting any mental health supports in schools is justified. We need more counselors, not fewer. It is for this reason that I also have concerns about the posted graduation specialist position. We all know that graduation is not just an isolated event of getting credits and passing tests and earning seals. It requires mental health support. It requires community resources. It requires family involvement. That is why it is so important to have certified, licensed professionals available to all students to guide them through these complex situations. School counselors deserve to be a part of conversations being had on how to best support students, especially when it comes to graduation, but also when it comes to their mental, emotional, and academic well-being. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're going to hear from Jennifer Foster, followed by Naomi Madaris, followed by Maggie Nelson. I might have gotten off by one person. If I did, I apologize.
Good evening, everyone. First, I want to start off by saying I'm a grandmother, a mother, a caregiver, a Roots ambassador, a mental health first aid specialist, a board member, and a caring, loving member of God. Let's talk about alignment. Cincinnati Public Schools has not been in alignment with our youth for such some time. I've been quiet for a long time, but the trauma continue on. It still unfolds. If you want to look at our specialists and caregivers, look at them like, as students, look at them as aunts, uncles, mothers, role models. I'm going to go back. I was one of those kids to look at school for home. Let's think about COVID. A lot of kids went home with the beast, and a lot of kids were left alone. So if you're going to each unfold anything for our starting off with schools, let's start off with relationships. School board has torn up relationships with kids. We have more kids on the streets than we do in school. Our suicide rate is extremely awful. At one time, I would say that males was dying quicker than young ladies, and now the statistics has changed. They have lost so much hope. They have been so disconnected. And as I said, if I ever had to experience this as a young kid and say, where was my principal? Where was my teacher? Now that she's gone, I would have been left out on the streets. Because keep in mind, school was my safe haven. And a lot of times, we're not looking at home as school for a lot of these kids. And let's think about trauma. Let's talk about ACEs. You add another layer to the ACEs that are kids that they already have. Let's peel back the ACEs and let's try connecting with these kids more better. Relationships is key. My son had a beautiful relationship with a teacher, with Linda Tubbs Wallace. I watched him flourish. He excelled. I even let him follow her to Woodward High School. Well, she left.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have Naomi Madaris, followed by Maggie Nelson, followed by Andrea Cruz.
Hello, board members and Superintendent Wright. Thank you for allowing us to speak with you this evening. My name is Naomi Madaris, and I am your lead school social worker, a role in which I am very proud to serve. My message is simple. You have phenomenal, highly trained Ohio Department of Education certificated social workers currently serving the students of CPS. You have the best of both worlds right here, professionals trained in mental health and education. The underlying barriers that lead to truancy and the behavioral health needs of our students require the expertise our professions possess. We ask that your solution to address the multifaceted challenges faced by our students and families be to, 1, hire more school social workers and school counselors to implement interventions, and 2, to not only maintain but increase the capacity of our existing attendance support specialists and make that role a senior support position so that they can continue to assist with the clerical demands associated with attendance and truancy. We got this. School social workers and school counselors. All we need are the resources. As you advocate for change, Superintendent Wright, know that the professions you have can ensure safe and welcoming schools. We can also support our teachers to do their jobs through trauma-informed care, restorative practice training, etc. Again, all we need are the resources, and you can make that happen. Happy School Social Worker Week. I am CPS. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Maggie Nelson, followed by Andrea Cruz, and then we'll switch to our online speakers.
I just wanted to mention quickly that I printed this out today, information about the board meeting, and it said that the limit for speaking was 3 minutes. So I don't know if that needs to be updated, but that's what I planned for, so I apologize. I'm Maggie Nelson. I'm a preschool teacher, and I'm also a CPS parent. This letter I'm going to read is written by a fellow preschool teacher, and I am sharing it with their permission today. To whom it may concern, I have been with CPS for over 5 years and worked in preschool many years before that, and I have always loved teaching. I loved working with the students, collaborating with other teachers, and just everything that comes with teaching. Last year, I started to love it less, and this year even more. I almost despise it because of what it has become. I dread coming to work every day and have thought numerous times about just walking out after being hit by a child time and time again. I have always tried to keep my head down and ride out the storm of what teaching is now with COVID, but I can no longer do that. I'm tired of being told this is happening everywhere, and I'm tired of being told others have it worse. I'm tired of seeing my coworkers hurt. I'm tired of seeing my coworkers stressed and crying, and tired of hearing about teachers going on anxiety medicine because they cannot take what teaching is anymore. If this is happening everywhere and worse, this must be a problem and it needs to be addressed. I've seen more students this year with behavior problems than ever before. I have heard of more preschoolers in pull-ups or not being potty trained than ever before. Preschoolers do come to school to learn socialization and what school is, but in the past 2 years, I've had to teach children how to interact and play with each other in a capacity I never had before experienced. I have always been the teacher that met the students where they are and accommodated them. But I have students that I can't find what works for them, and that is really rare for me. Right now in my class, I have 3 students that need one-on-one help daily, and I'm the only consistent teacher in my room. To be depended on by 20 3 to 5-year-olds, 3 of which have communication challenges and need constant one-on-one attention is hard. I'm exhausted. I've consistently been over the CPS ratio of 1 to 10.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our last, for this piece, we have Andrea Cruz, and then we'll go to our first online speaker.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Andrea Cruz. I teach preschool at Rising Stars at Vine, and I am a team leader there as well. I'm here because my team and most preschool teachers that I talk to are not feeling supported by the district. We have tried every avenue we can think of to get a seat at the decision-making table and be heard so that together we can create a high-quality environment for students that doesn't depend on us regularly working unpaid overtime and is not at the expense of our own mental health. We have not been fully staffed in over 2 years. And I'm going to skip a bunch, but wanted to say that research shows that high quality preschool is important and low quality preschool can actually cause harm to children. So what is high quality preschool? Well, high quality preschool isn't dependent on the number of hours or number of days a child attends each week and isn't merely looking good on paper. High quality preschool looks like teachers scaffolding students through play and having conversations that include multiple back and forth exchanges. High quality preschool allows students to learn in a well-prepared environment with materials that are intentionally chosen to engage and meet the needs of students. We know what is best for children, and we need time and support to help with them. It is my strong belief that we need less of a bureaucracy and more help on the front lines. Our kids deserve a high quality environment, and we have lots of good ideas for how to achieve this. I'm here to advocate for teachers and students alike, for I fear that if changes do not happen, you will see a mass exodus of good teachers over the next couple of years on top of the teacher shortage we are already facing. It is so important that this district focus on supporting teachers because research shows that teachers matter more to student achievement than any other factor related to schooling. I personally know many teachers in our district that have a 1, 2, or 3 year plan that results in them leaving. I truly want to see this district and the students and teachers within it succeed, but we have got to make some changes, and I do not think those changes include adding more people to the central office. On the contrary, we need more people in our schools that work directly with children and support teachers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have 2 online speakers, Clayton Adams, followed by Sean Harold. Go ahead, Mr. Adams.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Clayton Adams. I'm an intervention specialist at Aiken High School, as well as a CPS parent, calling in to express concern about the budget cuts happening and cutting of very crucial positions across the district. President Julie Sellers and CFT leadership found that the district is cutting 143 positions in buildings. I've been an employee of CPS since 2014, and there has never been one time where I've looked around within my own school building and thought there's too many people working here. If anything, we need more support, not less in the school buildings. I encourage you as school board members to ensure that the vast majority of the budget is being spent within school buildings, as well as ensuring schools are properly staffed, teachers, guidance counselors, social workers, security guards, and paraprofessionals. The voters have faithfully passed CPS levies because they think the money will be going towards helping students within actual school buildings, not allocating large amounts of money towards newly created positions at the Ed Center. Lastly, I am discouraged by the graduation specialist position. This position is redundant. There is no need to create a brand new non-CFT position that overlaps with two positions that already exist. I would encourage the district to just hire more licensed guidance counselors and licensed social workers to ensure all students are graduating on time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Our next speaker is Sean Harold. Go ahead, Mr. Harold.
Hi, my name is Sean Harold, and I'm a teacher at CANS. I'm speaking tonight because the recent talks about cutting attendance clerks, social workers, and also the decisions to not renew the reading specialist contracts are part of a broader trend that I've been noticing over the past few years of reducing school-based staff and at the expense, well, building central office staff at the expense of people in schools, school-based staff. U.S. News and World Reports found through an analysis of several large-scale randomized control trials examining the effects of reducing class sizes that student achievement goes up when class sizes go down. In California, they tried that, and they saw a marked difference in student achievement, especially for our Black and Brown students when class sizes were reduced. However, over the past couple years, our contracts have actually increased our class sizes. So the recent budget cuts are just a continuation trend. There's a plethora of studies that can consistently demonstrate positive effects of small group reading intervention, especially for ESL students, another subset of people that we service quite a number of in CPS, and especially for those at risk of reading failure. So the decision to build out administrative roles when, in my opinion, we're chronically understaffed at the school-based level is the exact opposite of what kids actually in our buildings and kids in need of more support, one-to-one support, relationships need. I see our counselors, our school social workers filling in at lunch and recess because we're understaffed. I see our attendance clerks, they are always busy. They are building relationships with students. Sometimes they have students with them as they're attempting to do the huge amount of work that they have to keep up with the bureaucracy of such a large system. And right now, what we need is more people in the schools, not more people at the central office. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker tonight is CFT President Julie Sellers. I mentioned this last time, but the contract between CFT and CPS grants the CFT president the right to speak at any meeting. And there's a tradition of that time being both at the end of the hearing of the public and without the 2-minute time limit.
Good evening, everyone. I have provided each one of the school board members a packet of materials, and I hope that you take the time to look through those packets. I also believe we must keep the attendance support specialists, which are also clerical attendance clerks, so there's no confusion between their position and the new administrative position. This year's budget process with the schools has been disjointed due to the change in the budgeting process with the elimination of pooling, individual spending of title funds, and spending ESSER dollars, which has clearly caused too much disruption and has caused district-wide confusion and alarm. It is a commonly held belief that these cuts will have a detrimental impact on the school's teaching and learning conditions. It has been the exercise of the district central office executive power over site-based management and leadership. We must build a budget that creates fully funded, fully staffed schools that promote successfully operating safe and orderly schools within the district that will promote academic achievement, including adding enough funds for Schedule E at all schools in an appropriate level. While there has been some discussion around the board's goals and guardrails, we have not had an honest and inclusive discussion concerning the district's budget. We believe that there needs to be a pause moving forward with this year's budget process for both schools and central office. We really need to dig deep into this budget with the treasurer, superintendent, 3 board standing committee chairs or their designee, and all of the union presidents. Our budget process has always been transparent and collaborative, unlike this year. With the latest data we received from the district, there are 142.77 position cuts. I didn't make those numbers up. That is the latest of each school's staffing sheets. There were also 93 teachers who were surplused, and I would like to go into the details of that. Of the 142 position cuts, there were 7.5 art teachers cut, 13 teachers in grade 4 to 6, and I believe that is due to incorrect class size numbers within the system for the formula. There were 17 K to 3 teachers cut, 9 intervention specialists cut, 7 math specialists cut, 6.8 music teachers cut, and it doesn't look to me like any of the schools in the elementaries have had their itinerant bands reinstated, which I know I have brought up with the board and the district at least 3 or 4 times publicly. 1.5 PE, 0.6 psych, 44 reading specialists, 2.6 school social workers, 28 super subs. Some schools have at least 5 people a day absent, and they're going to have 1 super sub. When you don't have enough subs to cover the positions when people are out, then that disrupts the entire school day for everyone, because they start pulling people in to cover positions, and those other people are not able to do their jobs. There has been a 0.2 SLP, even though we've been told that there's going to be 4 additional positions. There is 1 tech person cut, 1 Montessori pre-KK, 2 Montessori 9 to 12s, 11 career tech, which I am totally confused by, 1 strides teacher, 1 computer lab person, 1 teacher enrichment, 1 PBIS school social worker at a 0.4, a preschool hearing impaired teacher, and we have been told that the PAM specialist, that there will not be, by PAM specialists, that there won't be enough time in many of the elementary schools just to cover the contractual planning, without even talking about how teachers have time to have their data meetings and everything else that's put upon teachers. Class sizes have not been properly calculated within the district's formula, and stacking students into classrooms like sardines is not good for teachers or students. There have been clerical attendance clerk positions providing clerical support to the school social workers, which they will no longer have. Now, there have been some positions added. 1 was 1 7th and 8th grade teacher, 1 in the 9 through 12, 1 ICANN intervention specialist, 4.5 STEM, 1 world language, a 0.5 media specialist, health, 3 teachers, librarian 1, and 1 preschool DIS. I'm not sure how we're talking about hiring hundreds of people when I don't even think we know exactly where the positions are going to be. I would like for you in your packet, there is a response to the chart that each of you received last week about the difference between a school counselor and a graduation specialist. And as you can see, it's a total overlap of responsibilities, and that position is exactly the same classification as a school counselor. Ohio school counselors must have a master's degree from an approved program of preparation recommended by the dean or head of the teacher's education college, a successful completion of an examination as prescribed by the State Board of Education, and successful completion of an internship consisting of 600 contact hours in a school setting. They also must pass a test. And to say that you're going to have administrators who only have to have a bachelor's degree, this is a complete slap in the face and deprofessionalization of within our ranks. And it is a disrespectful to every person within our district who has worked hard to get the qualifications necessary to do the job. If you look on your next packet, there was a school counselors matter. And 38 states are shortcutting either their students of color or students from low-income families or both. And if you look on the second page, there is a map of the United States. And some states, Ohio is unequal, but we are a little bit better than most states. And so we've been doing this, and we have the professionals to do this work. If you look at the states, the states that are in dark, they're in red if you pull this site up. Florida is one of those states that is unequal access with too few school counselors across the state and across most districts. We don't want to go to what some of these states have as they're providing supports to their students and families. The next one is from the American School Counselor Association, and it's the role of the school counselor. It's a 2-page. The ideal caseload is 1 to 250. We're nowhere near that. And then there is a whole response of school social workers based on the chart that was sent out this week, showing that they are also doing the job that these newly created administrative positions would have. And then the Cincinnati Public Schools graduation data, and it's for the class from 2010 to 2020. I know we're not at the place where we need to be, but how many people have an 83.9 or an 84.9 would say that is a D? Now, okay, we are a D for graduation, but anywhere in the whole United States or world, an 84% is not a D. That's why we should stop looking at these report card grades. They are made up. They're to make our schools look as if they're not performing, and our students are performing. I just want to read to you, in your packet, you can look at this, how much each school has, their graduation rates have increased over the years. And there is a chart that says the graduation classes from 2010 to 2019, and those numbers are growing in almost every school. There was only, I think, one school that had a graduation drop. And I would like to just say that overall CPS has increased from a 63% to an 85%. But I would like to shout out Euler School, which most of you would think, oh, that school's a failure. It is not a failure. It's unbelievable the growth that they have had. Their graduation scores were at one point 21.9%, and with the help of the Community Learning Center and all of the work that the counselors and school social workers have done in that school, they have increased to last year 94.3%, and it was a 72.4 point increase in less than 10 years. That is amazing. Show me another school that has had those kinds of increases. And we know what needs to be done. We do need more people. I say move every one of those administrative graduation specialists, hire another counselor. For every one of the attendance specialists, hire another school social worker. If you want to make the improvements necessary, we need to do that. But we also, as a district, we need to recognize what we're known for, and that is our community learning centers, and our schools need to be fully implemented with our community learning centers so that all kids have the ability to make the increases like that. I would like to say that the work that the attendance specialist and graduation specialist is already being done by our school counselors and social workers. The decision to create these new positions might be unwise, but treating them as anything other than teachers who belong in CFT's bargaining unit is clearly unlawful. Whether an employee belongs to CFT depends on the work they do, not the title they are given. And these positions are doing the CFT bargaining unit work. So if the district follows through with hiring them, then these, by law, these positions must be CFT positions. And then the last thing in your packet, I know that the preschool teacher wrote a really long, heartfelt letter. I'm hearing this from many different teachers within the district. We need to be fully staffed in all of our schools so that our students have the supports in place and that we retain the teachers we have, and that school is a wonderful place, a place where teachers want to work and parents want to send their children. In order to do that, we have to have the professionals hired to be able to service our children the way they should be serviced. But I would like to say, please pause this budget so that we can really have a conversation about and make a review. What is it that each school really needs? And we have not been able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Sellers. With item D, hearing of the public concluded, we're going to move to item E, which is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the special meeting minutes from February 27th and the business meeting minutes from February 27th?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes are approved. We have 3 committee reports this evening. We're going to hear first from the Ad Hoc Attendance Boundaries Committee from Chair Dr. Moffitt.
So thank you, President Lindy. I'm going to also ask my fellow committee members to interject on areas specifically that they saw fit within the meeting. We held a meeting on February the 23rd at 4 p.m., our monthly meeting. We did decide to come to consensus on specific items, and the minutes are posted online, so I won't read them if you're interested in what we talked about. Just a reminder, this is an ad hoc attendance, elementary attendance boundaries committee. So our charge is specifically to look at elementary schools and the attendance boundaries for the elementary schools. But in the best interest of time, because I know that we're a little tapped, go to the website, look at the maps that we've got presented, look at the committee meeting. I'm going to skip to the action items. We talked about Committee Member Jones requested to hear more about enrollment, capacity, and other variables pertinent to the mission of the ad hoc committee and CPS. But she noted that our current plan, which is the audit from the administration, was a good one. And you can expand on that if you like. Committee Member Jones also suggested that the board and the ad hoc committee look at demographic equity when we consider reorganization. Since we're doing this in tandem with the administration and the community as a committee, we talked about a marketing plan. All of our people in attendance agreed, considering, in addition to the administration, that marketing of our schools and all the great things that are going on in our schools needs to significantly increase. And Committee Member Bolton, these are specific. Committee Member Bolton requested to identify the various systems within CPS. I'll let her expand, but we've got a bunch of different systems. We've got our Montessori system, we've got our magnets system, we've got different systems. And we were wanting to look at a visual on a map of the programming, the enrollment, transportation, any gaps that exist. We're kind of wanting to look at this in totality. And we've also decided as a consensus to put our district in corridors, east, west, central. And so, again, I'm trying to kind of go a little faster, but we want to look at, we've got the audit from the administration who conducted a program audit. In short, what her program audit was the programming at each school, does it align with what the initial intent of the programming for that school was? For instance, Padea. Is it a true Padea school? And so we've got an outline now with that audit of what the school's programming was intended, what it is. We want to now, as a committee, in tandem with the administration and the community, look at enrollment, look at the program, look at transportation, and look at the boundary lines, and then look at that in totality to see, are we under-enrolled, are we over-enrolled, with specificity. I'm going to ask my committee members to add anything that they would like, because this is pretty important work. Is there anything that I've missed?
No, I think this is a great summary so far, and it's important to emphasize just how big this effort is as it begins to take hold regarding from its original efforts and how that impacts. So I appreciate the summary. It's great.
Just to add another action item, I suggested and I requested to identify the listing of elementary schools and high schools that those schools are attending in comparison to transportation distance and the cost of that transportation, just so you all know that as well. So, and then we also wanted to look at what are some of the elementary schools, what high schools are they feeding into? And so we're really wanting to look at in totality our elementary schools and how it's impacting our high schools, but we also welcome community involvement. So this is not something that we're doing alone. We will be making recommendations to the board in consultation with the administration or in concert with the administration as well. So I submit these as written and hope for approval.
Thank you very much, Chair Moffitt. Any questions for the ad hoc committee? Vice President Craig.
I just said the one, and I know this is something that the ad hoc has already talked about pretty thoroughly, is to dividing the district into the different corridors, and just trying to maybe also get the idea, because I saw in here that the superintendent provided the number of students in each of the different corridors, and I'm just wondering, are we thinking about it as a dividing line of where students are actually residing as far, or where they're actually attending schools? Like, are we dividing the schools up into the three corridors, or are we doing by population? Because I think that could be an interesting issue for some parts where what qualifies as central versus east and west.
I'm almost a little nervous, but I'm going to let Board Member Bolton take this one because she might be a little long-winded, but considering that this was specifically what she asked for, you might be afraid you asked that question.
As much as we might want to, we're not transporting any schools to different locations, but we are drawing lines. The administration is drawing lines that are reflective geographically, but also are somewhat equal in enrollment in the east, the west, the central, and largely being able to offer a similar spectrum of choice in each of those spectrums, so that we increase the access and the equity and also the ability to financially sustain making those sorts of choices to our folks, to our families. And then also one of the things that Board Member Jones raised is, I think it was, somebody did, it's a combined effort, might have been somebody in the community, lifting a couple of our schools that are more admittance-oriented, more exclusive, probably taking them out of the mix of numbers of students in those corridors, because that disproportionately represents. So we've had great support from the administration, both on the big picture and also in the fine detail as we've been proceeding through this. So that's part of it. And I think what we want to do is have a sustainable, accessible, equitable choice offering for our families for the next couple of years as we do what we need to do.
Board Member Jones, did you want to add anything there?
Yes, just very quickly. I think an added element about all this is everybody knows we've talked about the struggles we've had with transportation. And we are hopeful, this committee is hopeful, that once this plan is more finalized, laid out, that the whole transportation issue will not be as huge of an issue, and that because we're looking for effective ways and efficient ways to make sure that our kids can get to the schools where they live, where there's programming that they want. So we're not going all over the city. Now, we know that that's farther down the pike here, but you have to talk about that in addition to changing the lines and all of that, because it's all part of a bigger picture.
Thank you, Board Member Jones. Any other comments? We'll go to our policy committee. All right. Vice President Craig, did you have something? No? Okay. We'll hear next from Chair Morosky of the Policy and Equity Committee.
Thank you, President Lindy. We had a great meeting on February the 24th. There will be an exciting policy in front of you this evening to vote on. So I'll give you a little teaser as we lead up to that. But we started our discussion with Policy 2440, which we've been talking about for a little while. It's extended learning opportunities, and we're going to talk about it again at our March meeting, and then bring something before you, hopefully after that, but we're not going to rush it. That meeting will be at March 17th. I am going to read you, and for the public's edification and people watching at home, some word-for-word changes that I think are pretty important. So my committee members, Ms. Bolton and Ms. Weinberg, discussed and provided the following updates for discussion and inclusion into extended learning opportunities. Language about credit course recovery, offering summer learning, extending learning beyond the school day, Edgenuity in-person and virtual instruction offered as learning platforms in relation to IEPs or 504s, virtual learning for graduation coursework, no school site requiring more or less specific criteria regarding construction or time. Second and third grade students that are not proficient in October will be invited for opportunities to attend summer extended learning. Focus on enrichment for 4th through 8th grade and remediation with intensive focus on high school. So you can see we've taken a lot of time and a lot of effort and listened to a lot of folks. We've had a lot of input to get to this point. We've had this agenda item, I think, for a few months now. It was when Dr. Moffitt, we had just started at the end of last year. I'm going to skip ahead. At the end, Committee Weinberg expressed concern about the summer learning grades 5 through 12 and preferred 2 through 12, which I think we all did, and that's what we kind of left it with the superintendent and where we'll be. And that's for this summer we're talking. So the action item, the superintendent is going to be updating the policy with the recommendations and with general counsel, and we'll look at it again on March 17th. The minutes also talk about an alcohol waiver, but we passed that last week. Policy 5410, promotion and retention. This policy has also been in our committee for quite some time, and will stay in our committee, and we'll talk about it again on March 17th. Some of the discussion on the February meeting, General Counsel Hoying reported that the union CFT had weighed in on the policy and language from the collective bargaining agreement, and that language has been incorporated into the latest drafts of the policy. Language to emphasize collaboration with parents, teachers, and administrators has been included, as well as language from Ohio Revised Code that states, quote, students shall not be promoted if there's truancy issue, unless the student's principal and teachers agree that the student should be promoted. The administration is going to revise language that currently reads, and this is a pretty significant shift in thinking and philosophy. And our board historian, as appointed by former member Melanie Bates, Eve Bolton, has informed us, this has been around for a while. And the statement I'm getting at is, current policy references the board's intent that each student successfully promote in a continuous pattern of achievement. And throughout the policy, there's this sort of tacit to direct reference to the Board of Education preferring promotion no matter what. And that is not the current committee or last year's version of the committee, which had Dr. Moffitt, is not, in our estimation, accurate. This will obviously come before the board for a full discussion if people believe that, but our thinking is that if a student is not prepared to move forward, that it is probably not a good idea to just move this student forward. And the policy has stated that for quite some time. And so if there is a disagreement, is the philosophy of the board, obviously we could talk about it now or we could wait until we bring the final draft. But I do think that's a significant change, and I appreciate Member Bolton for reminding us of that at every meeting that we've talked about it. We have a new policy, another new policy from your policy committee, policy 7217, which we will vote on tonight, weapons and school behavior threat assessment. You'll recall sometime last year and a long time ago, it feels like now, I made an assignment to ourselves to look at student threat policy, and if we had one, and started talking about it again with Dr. Moffitt last fall, and now Ms. Weinberg, we have wrapped it up. Assistant General Counsel Stephanie Scott has done a lot of research in this policy and drafted a really good one, similar to she did with anti-racism and the vaccine policy. Ms. Scott has been a part of some pretty forward-thinking brand new policies for the school district. This is one of them, I believe. You have the copy in front of you. One thing I will highlight right now that is reflected in the minutes, and we have highlighted at all of our meetings, is the language that says, we will prohibit and won't tolerate profiling of any kind based on religion, race, color, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, socioeconomic status, disability, or age in our programs, activities, or employment. The Ohio state government is going to be, asking districts to have student threat assessment protocol like we have. Speaking only for myself, I don't have a tremendous amount of faith in our state government or how they see our students. We felt it was important to be very explicit about this. We have to include some of their language, but we can also include our own language, and so I just wanted to call that out. Excuse me. So we will be voting on this tonight. In that conversation, I think it's important to let people know that at our next meeting, it came up, some Title IX issues came up as well, unrelated to this, but it's in the minutes. I think it's important. At our next meeting, we're going to have some outside counsel come and give us some updates to Title IX, sex discrimination and sexual harassment policy. A lot of this was born out of some student advocacy as well. So the March 17th meeting, we'll discuss that, and it should be good conversation. And then lastly, other business, state law for attendance and truancy. We referenced this before. Committee member Bolton asked what the state law requires regarding attendance and truancy. And so we got an update on that. General Counsel Hoying reported we're well within the law. He stated House Bill 410 was completely transformed 4 years ago on how schools do attendance. Schools are now required to have attendance intervention meetings that include social workers, administrator, teacher, et cetera. As we stated earlier, we included this language in the new promotion retention policy as well. Tax abatement policy came up. There was a question from Ms. Weinberg. It was about charging late fees on pilot payments. We took care of that. Committee member Weinberg about telework and the status of our draft policy. The superintendent reported the telework procedures were sent to all staff. The Ohio Department of Education and Discipline, this is committee member Bolton, brought this up at the end. She reported CFD President Julie Sellers had made her aware, of ODE's discipline guide, thought it might be important for the admin to take a look at this. Superintendent Wright reported she's seen the document and that our code of conduct is revised every year, and we will be sure to include any of the updates at ODE in that. Almost last but not least, now I'm going to get to my green matter from earlier. If people are stuck around for the big reveal. So earlier, you may recall at our very first meeting this year, the superintendent had talked about Neola coming in and maybe doing an audit policy writ large. Like, do we have gaps in our policies? Which we still think is a good idea. Neola can't really do that, so it's not going to be them. But we are going to continue to do that. And for those who are new to this conversation, what we're talking about is somebody coming in, looking at the global picture and saying, are there gaps in our policies? Like, do we not have a policy that covers X, Y, and Z as well as it should? We have probably too many policies, and this committee has gone out of its way to make sure they're tight and give people good direction. But at the same time, we can't see, what we can't see. So we're going to have someone come in. And then the board bylaws, we're going to bring these up. Every member of the board should have gotten an email, or will get an email from Phyllis, did get an email, will get an email from Phyllis to get me feedback on our board bylaws by a specific date, the Monday, actually, before the March 17th meeting. We will look at all of your feedback. We will talk about this in March. We will talk about it in April, and then by the May date, hence my good grade earlier, by May, we'll have something for the full board. I present the minutes as written.
Thank you, Mr. Moraski. Do you have any questions or discussion of the Policy and Equity Committee meeting minutes before we go to Budget and Finance? Thank you very much. Mr. Moraski, Chair Bolton, would you present the Budget, Finance, and Growth Committee report, please?
Yes, gladly. Thank you very much. We'll make it as short as we possibly can. Members of our committee, obviously myself, and also Vice President Craig and Dr. Moffitt. It's a lot of work to be done, as we've witnessed tonight, on finance. And summarizing it, I would first, as it is posted, I would check if I were members and members of the community, some of the financial monthly reports are there for everyone's perusal. And I would encourage you to check those out. Won't read all of that to you. Largely because of the discussions about abatements that were occurring in the city, we were fortunate enough to have Michelle Dillingham come and provide us with a summary of where we are in the political discussion and ramifications of that dialogue. And we appreciate the advocacy that TFT and other community members have been providing as the city works through that, because it would have some impact even though it's residential. And also we're facing an agreement to negotiations regarding the current agreement that we have with the city. So it's very apropos that we got that background information. General Counsel Hoyne presented an insurance update, and I think part of that is in the Treasurer's report tonight regarding the costs of our insurance, and like every place else, the cost is going up. We also had Mr. Ashley from the Treasurer's office present an investment update, and not only is it provided for you in numbers, but graphs, which I like the best. I appreciate that. There was some discussion about preschool enrollment. And again, for at least the 6th or 7th month, we have discussed the fact that much of the reserve of monies from the original levy that was passed and we've been using, and it's been renewed, much of that reserve is gone now. And indeed, we are living more as annually on the money that's being produced. And so we had a brief discussion, very brief, but it'll be longer later, discussion about when that renewal will be up, and will that renewal be a renewal, or will we need to have more, or how shall we approach it? So that's one of the issues that will be before us during this 5-year forecast. We also had presented by the Treasurer the CAFR report, which provides a tremendous amount of information, not only financial, but also how we kind of rank among other districts, even in some issues in some areas of academics, and cost per child and expenditure per child. And we encourage the board members to review much of that CAFR. We also then had a rather, and this is apropos tonight, a rather lengthy discussion about the budget process, how the budget process and development is relating to the goals and guardrails that we've all agreed to as we move forward. And that too, all of those are listed in the minutes. And then we also had a rather lengthy discussion about where we can still as a board fit in, and really in the plan that we have now from the Treasurer and the Superintendent, the March and April are the 2 months where indeed the board can have the greatest impact and needs to be having the greatest review. We know that when we had this finance meeting, we know that the appeals process was taking place from the schools, and we also knew that the administration was gearing up to begin the second half, which would be the work to determine budgets regarding the central office. We made a special effort to make sure that people understood, and administration understood where we were, and that was that the budget process is not done, obviously, and it is in a state of flux and renewal and review, and that it must be passed by June 30th or get an extension. So we talked briefly, very briefly, because I was basically talking to myself about this, which is wanting to have an extension, a 90-day extension, because I was concerned that the budget was not going to be ready. This is a huge year for a budget, and I won't go into why it's a huge year, but people have raised interesting questions. Superintendent's been very open to different ideas, been very encouraged about the dialogue in this district about Title I and how it is to be used. I think, too, we've talked briefly about the role of the economically disadvantaged sorts of grants, as well as talking about what can we change to maximize our efficiencies and what have you. We heard from the public, one school, actually two schools, one about process and also one about the cuts that they were surviving or not surviving. And we appreciated that input greatly. And then also, very, very key to this budget, possibly, we also had, again, an extended discussion regarding property in this district and how best it can be used and what kinds of properties we may still need, and indeed how we can possibly maximize whatever efforts we can make to provide the kinds of choices and reasonable growth to the district that will allow us to continue to secure the plurality of the market share of the families that are having children and teenagers attending schools. I submit the minutes as preferably not read, but preferably written.
Thank you, Chair Bolton. Do we have any questions or discussion on the Budget, Finance, and Growth Committee? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt all three committee reports?
So moved.
Thank you, Vice President Craig. Is there a second? Thank you, Board Member Jones. All in favor signify by saying, well, any additional discussion? Just check. I don't think so, but just check. No, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Committee reports are adopted. Wonderful. Moving on to item G, this is the strategic plan discussion. I wanted to thank all the board members for the past conversations we've had on this topic. I think Member Bolton gave a great summary of this, so I won't rehash it, but I think she gave a great summary at the beginning. Truly, I think the only question I wanted to ask here was, did anyone have any questions about the proposal from the Alma group that we discussed last week and that was sent out Tuesday morning last week and is in the treasurer's report this evening? I didn't get any questions from anybody, but I wanted to just create a moment if there were any. Dr. Moffitt?
So I was a little unclear. I read the proposal from Alma and I thought everything looked great, but I was unclear that they are conducting these engagement sessions with the board members, correct? Not for the board members? Or is that something that we're participating in or we are not?
Member Bolton, do you want to answer that?
I think it's both with the board members. They'll be, I think they clearly say that there's going to be with us, and then also on certainly on our behalf. And it's my belief that too we will be, participants, but they will conduct the actual, as they did during the superintendent search. They will be conducting informing the questions and whatever with our insights, providing as they start. So I think it's with and for. And I think the community, as they appreciated with our focus groups in the first half of this effort, understanding that the board is listening and this is going directly to the board. And this does not delay anything, the great many things that the administration and the superintendent's team has to keep going forward with the goals and the guardrails. And this begins to be the stuff that obviously boards like, particularly because the expertise on the other stuff is with the administration. But this is really about listening to the community. We've not, I think this is correct, we have not revised our vision and mission since 2017. Even in our last strategic plan, we kept it. We liked them, and we're proud of them. So this is exciting. And then something that's been added is this word that the superintendent has used, which is this forecasting, which is us envisioning with the community, envisioning where we want our district to be. And so I think the treasurer and the superintendent have talked about a 30 plan or something. And also we've talked about whether this is for 3 years or 7 years. I would submit that we probably need to call this strategic plan the bicentennial plan, because I know I just made that up right now. I thought about it. Think about it. And it's true. In, 2029, I believe, this school district, the first one in the Northwest Ordinance Territory, will be 200 years old. So I think we're aiming towards that bicentennial. I know the superintendent's mentioned something to me before about it. I think it's kind of exciting. Where do you want to be when we turn 200?
I love it. I love it. But I kind of want to get my question answered a little bit more succinctly. So
I can't help it. I miss teaching history.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Back to my question.
That's it.
Are we participating? I think the public is, the expectation of the public is that these were conducted like they were before. And so that is changed. So I want to have some clarity on what the expectation of board members are with regard to ALMA facilitating the vision and the mission. So that's kind of what I'm asking for. I think that it's been my experience that people are participating in the superintendent's strategic plan with the expectation that it was like it was, and it's not. And it's been made clear that that the board is doing another one. So I want to have some clarity around what that's going to look like. Are they going to have board members present? Or is this going to be an organization that is conducting these on behalf of board members? Are board members going to be in attendance like we were at the listening sessions in the past? I think that's what my question is.
I would hope that we would allow the ALMA folks to run it. And I wouldn't be surprised if board members would want to attend, and that there would be some expectation of board members attending as they would like, and more as an observer. So I think that is, and I think some of those technicalities, as well as some of these bigger important questions, very important questions that you're asking, be worked out when we can kind of have those meetings with ALMA as we line it up. But I would expect board participation in attendance, and I would expect the professionals to guide the work, and we will start them off. And they'll end up with us. And then this becomes the first part of this strategic plan. We did it a little differently, kind of in reverse, but actually I think we'll feel better about the way we're approaching it when it finally gets done.
Thank you, Dr. Moffett. Thank you, Ms. Bolden. Other questions or discussion? No vote here, but it's in the treasurer's report, and so I wanted to give people a chance to ask any questions. Okay, we're going to move on to resolutions. We have two normal ones and then a third that is of a new kind. And when we get to that third one, I'm wanting to invite up our general counsel to just share some context with the public on why it's in the format that it's in, because you'll notice that in the appendix there are 10 different references. So for the first resolution, Mrs. Weinberg, would you like to introduce this one?
Yes, thank you, President Lindy. So I am going to be presenting for the Cincinnati Public Schools a resolution approving students eligible for subsidy reimbursement in lieu of transportation for the 2022 to the 2023 school year. And I hope that it will be accepted, or the resolution will be accepted.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Jones. Any discussion or questions on the first resolution? Treasurer Wagner, would you call the vote, please?
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Moffett? Mr. Morosky?
Aye.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
President Lindy?
Yes. We have a second resolution from Mr. Morosky.
Thank you, President Lindy. It is my pleasure to introduce Resolution 7217, School Behavioral Threat Assessment. This is the policy that I discussed in the meetings, the new one. I present the resolution as written.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Bolden. Any discussion on the second resolution? Mr. Morosky.
One last comment that I did not include in the presentation of the minutes that I was a bit remiss in doing is that I think it is important to note that across this entire country, there has been an increase in threats at schools. We have been very, very fortunate in this district that none of these threats have come to fruition. That is due to the investments we've made in the safety and well-being of our students, to the security personnel at our schools, other adults, yes, the SRO program. And we wanted to get ahead of this by discussing this. So I just wanted to put that out there. This is one more tool in our toolbox that makes sure that our students are kept safe and being forward thinking and reacting to a nationwide trend in rural and urban districts alike.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Other questions or discussion on the second resolution? Ms. Bolton.
I just want to applaud Chairman Morosky for his diligence and perseverance on all these sorts of topics, whether it's going to Columbus or whether it's us taking the right direction for our students and staff.
Thank you. I share the same. Other questions or comments?
That's the right one.
All right, here we go. Hearing no other discussion or questions, Ms. Wagner, would you call the vote on the second resolution, please?
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt? Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
President Lindy?
Yes. Before I ask someone to introduce Resolution 3, Mr. Poing, would you just share an update on the change in state law here and the context for the...
Yes, good evening. Thank you. The resolutions before you relate to complaints that the district is Board of Revision on the valuation of certain properties within the city. The district has a long file, like a sale, or that a sale showed a value higher than the auditor has it on, and so the district can be involved in those cases and has been for many years. That what's new is under HB 126 passed last summer. In order to participate in those cases, the board has to pass a resolution approving our participation in those cases, and we have to provide notice to the taxpayer. We have done that in these 10 cases. Each of these cases represents a sale that occurred that is both 10% higher than the auditor's value of the property and also at least $500,000 higher. So there's a materiality threshold before we would be involved in filing one of these complaints. With the 10 resolutions before you, I urge their passage. Glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Hoing, just wanted to make sure I was responding to this correctly. I really appreciate you mentioning that this is a process we've always followed. The difference now is we have to have a resolution announcing that we're doing it, but we've always done it. And I think that, just to make sure I heard you right, the reason why we do it is a lot of our funding comes from property taxes. Here are examples where a property is being sold for a higher value than the property taxes we receive. And we would like to make sure that the students within CPS are getting the full value of the property taxes for that piece of property.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Right. Any questions? So first of all, is there a motion to introduce that third resolution, which incorporates all 10 of those items in the appendix?
Thank you. I would like to present for board consideration and approval resolutions authorizing the filings of an original Board of Revision complaint as authorized by Ohio Revised Code number 5715.19 with the Hamilton County Board of Revision, presented by the Cincinnati Board of Education, and there is an appendix that has all that. So this resolution would include all of 10 of the resolution. I submit for approval.
Thank you, Board Member Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussions either for any of us or for our General Counsel? Dr. Moffitt.
I do have a question. Do we know about how much additional monies that would bring in approximately, like what they were valued at a $10,000 benefit, but they should have been a $50,000 We know that.
I have values on the current auditor's value and the sale value for each of the properties. Again, they meet that materiality threshold. The difference, the additional taxes are a fraction of that. But yes, I have that. Is there a particular property you were asking about, or?
No, I was just thinking in the total, like the total package of 10 are undervalued approximately X million dollars.
I don't have a total value. Each of the properties are several $1 million higher. The sale was higher than the current auditor's value.
Okay. But that's it. It was fine. I was just wondering about how much were they undervalued?
I mean, just to give you an example, the Provident Building, which is at 642 Vine, that's one of the properties, has a current auditor value of $16.9 million. The sale was $36.9 million. So it's a significant difference. There may be other factors involved. That is sorted out by the Board of Revision, but that's an example of.
Thank you for your work, General Counsel and team, and Treasurer's Office and team, and Superintendent. Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Member Bolden?
I just have a question as to, we've been doing similar sorts of things for a long time. Can you possibly opine why we're now doing it this way by state law?
I can only speculate that. I mean, it certainly makes it a more political decision. These tended to be very apolitical. I mean, we would look at the sales values and the auditor's values and then just file the complaints without any kind of politics involved. I think that's part of it. There's also a number of new procedural steps that potentially could be challenged. So it is making it more difficult for the school district to be a part of that process. Last thing I say, I do not believe Cincinnati has been either the most aggressive, in the state. There are stories about other districts that, will challenge, kind of. That's why I think some of the new materiality rules are in place. But also, I think we are paying attention, of course, and I think it's incumbent on us, and we have a duty to do that. So that's been our position. It's been very apolitical. I think this process makes it more political, personally.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoying. Any other discussion or questions on Resolution 3? Treasurer Wagner, would you call the vote, please?
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt? Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
President Lindy?
Yes. Moving on to Section I, the Superintendent of Schools section. Do we have any retirements this evening, Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes, President Lindy, we have one. We have one certificated. Her name is Maria N. Bonavita, and please excuse me if I have said it incorrectly, but Assistant Elementary Principal at RSA Cheviot West. We would love to thank her for her service and her commitment to this district, and we wish her all of the best in her endeavors.
Thank you very much, Member Weinberg. Is there a motion to adopt the superintendent's recommendations this evening?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Bolden. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vice President Craig. Any discussion on the recommendations of the superintendent? Hearing none, Ms. Wagner, would you call the vote, please?
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt? Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
President Lindy?
Yes. Moving on to the report of the treasurer, is there a motion to introduce that report?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you. I think that was Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions on anything in the report of the treasurer this evening? Treasurer Wagner, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
I'll recuse on item number 3 and yes on everything else.
Dr. Moffitt? Yes. Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
President Lindy?
Yes. Okay, reaching the last sections here of our agenda this evening, we have a couple items in board matters. There were several different board members who had something related to the FY24 budgeting process. I tried to capture them in terms of a timeline, some ESSER questions, some questions about position changes. Some of those were related to ESSER, some of those were not related to ESSER. I know Ms. Bolden, maybe we'll start with a timeline, go to Dr. Moffitt on ESSER and position changes, and if I missed anybody, we should have time to cover anything else too.
Yes, I'd like to again suggest and try to influence my fellow board members on how big, not in size, but how important and impactful this particular budget is going to be within our 5-year forecast, and also because it is representing many transformational things that the new administration has brought to us, but also recognizing too that we face a number of challenges in the next few years, whether it's that renewal or whatever preschool, whether it is the master contracts, if you will, of 6 unions, whether it's the reopener that we face now. There are many, many pressures, as well as Dr. Moffitt will be talking about, the ESSER piece in all of this. And it's my concern is that the board must be very deeply involved, as the timeline laid out by the treasurer has indicated, that indeed March and April are when we actually start to see where we are with the budget. We've been very pleased with the process as designed, but these are the 2 months that normally we would have the most impact. The board has a lot to try to decide and think about and okay and move ahead if we're going to be voting on June 30th. And I think as the district moves from both the schools to now the central office piece, a number of issues have been brought to us, and a number of great efforts have been made by a number of people to keep us on track. So this is a very heavy consideration as we, as a board, gain more information from the great many people that do this on a daily basis on our behalf, as well as the people that we represent, be they our staff or community members. So March and April are very big budget months, but we might be faced with many more questions than we normally have, and many more challenges in the next 5-year forecast than we normally face. And I just want to, again, emphasize to my colleagues how big this actually is as we move forward.
Thank you, Member Bolden. Mr. Morawski?
I appreciate it, President.
In response to Ms. Bolden's point?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. No, thank you, President Lindy, and thank you, Ms. Bolton. I too feel the magnitude of this budget. I feel it's going to be a transformative budget. I feel like it's already shaping up to be that way. I also feel and applaud the organized efforts to come to us with input and feedback. I think the recommendations of the superintendent are certainly transformative. I think recommendations heard from the community are. So I don't know if the recommendation is to pause the process or pass a 90-day waiver or what it is, but I would be in favor of, I prefer to vote on it June 30th. So I don't know if it's 90 days as much as it would be pause. I'd probably be more in favor of a pause and wrap our brains around some things, because I have been compelled by a lot of what I've heard. I've certainly been compelled by the recommendations of the superintendent as well, and like the opportunity to innovate. But I have been compelled by the things that I've heard in the past few meetings. So I would be in favor of some sort of pause, come to Jesus. I don't know what the right term is, but I would prefer to vote on something June 30th if we can.
Thank you, Mr. Morawski. Other thoughts on timeline? I don't know if the administration would like to share any perspective.
Thank you, President Lindy, and thank you, board members, for the feedback collectively. You know, one of the things that we have tried to work on throughout the year is really making sure that we are sharing the information as we have it, and we are also preparing to start the school year. I think one of the most difficult parts of riding the bike and building it at the same time is the school year is upon us. We have a school year that starts in August, And so we have to prepare for the school year that starts in August with projections. As we talked about at the Finance Committee meeting, projections mean that this is what we look at, this is what we project based on historical information, this is what we think is going to happen, but we honestly do not know until students show up. Unfortunately, we cannot wait to prepare for students when they show up. And so this gives us an opportunity to work at the school level, to look at our historical information, to get feedback from schools, and then look at where we are in terms of our budgeting and budgeting expectations and move forward. One of the things that we shared with the families, parents that have come to us, we shared this through the Finance Committee, those that have emailed me, they know that I've responded to them as well, to say that we also look at numbers throughout the summer. And so as we are preparing for the school year, we are preparing for based on where we are right now, but we continue to look at what happens through the summer. I think the third part of that that's also very relevant is we don't anticipate any rifts. So we don't anticipate any reductions in force for our teachers. So we might look at, based on projections, positions moving from one school to another school, but we don't anticipate at all having teachers that we would not be able to place. And so I think that that's important to also elevate as we start talking about movement, even when we think about the vacancies that we have currently and what we anticipate going into next year. The data shows us that we hire somewhere around between 350 and 375 teachers a year. And so even if we're talking about a reduction of 164, those individuals have to go somewhere in terms of those overall positions. So it's not just a matter of these individuals for teaching positions would be reduced, but it's a matter of where they would serve based on where the students are. I think the second thing along those same lines is if there are recommendations, when we start talking about the budget and recommendations from last year, if you recall, in transitioning into the district, there were positions that were recommended at that time that those positions were surplus. And so essentially what that meant is I walked in on May the 2nd, and it was shared with me about 2 weeks later that these positions are positions that we are expecting to delimit at this time. I shared at that time that I felt very uncomfortable coming into the district on May the 2nd, and my first action is contacting anyone and sharing with them that their positions would be eliminated. So instead, we worked through the budget. We brought a budget to you that was balanced, that you voted on, that included us looking to reduce those positions this year. We contacted the individuals last year to make them aware so that it gave them the year to then continue in those positions or then look for additional other positions in the district. The third piece to that is we also want to make sure that we're keeping individuals in the district that are committed to the district. So even if there are positions that we're not recommending, that we continue for whatever reason, whether that, and generally that reason is based on strategy, but if we're looking not to keep that position, we are also looking at what other positions are available in the district that we can then work with these individuals on so that we can keep them as a part of the district. So I think my response would be at this point, I do believe that it would set us back in terms of trying to prepare to bring to you recommendations around a balanced budget. I think it's very normal. We talked about this quite a bit in finance. I think it's very normal for lobbying to start, and that's great. That's exactly what's supposed to happen, that we're looking for individuals to give their side, to share why they think it's important. It's great if they would also raise that with administration as well, so that we're able to provide feedback and address it as we're going through the thought process. We're willing to be thought partners. But at the same time, we also want to make certain that we're improving overall student outcomes. And when we look at our current data, there's a lot of work that we have to do in that space. So with that being said, my hope would be that even if we go to a situation where we are taking a time to do a deeper dive and have more conversation, which the treasurer and I have already talked about, generally that's something that would happen right around that April timeframe, as we've been able to work with the departments at that point, because We are moving things around, making shifts and making recommendations, but what we bring to you will be our best thinking. And then after that, it opens up in terms of what happens next and what that work looks like. So that would be my feedback.
Thank you, Superintendent. Anybody who has not shared yet want to share any perspective here? Vice President Craig.
I would just add, I think I agree with Mike in the sense of that I would hope that we would get somewhere so we could have a budget by June 30th. I think my one concern is that there are costs that come with not having a budget on that date. And as we continue to talk about these things, I think that's just something we need to keep bringing up, is that cost of not having a budget on that date means that there's something else we can't do or something else we're not doing. And so it's not to say that we don't look at the options, we don't look at the things, we don't do a deep consideration and really review what's coming in, but just also recognizing that as we do that, trying to do that in a way that keeps everybody or minimizes the cost to the district of what those things are. Because the other part to it is I also know folks are making their decisions on what they want to do personally at each level. And so if they're thinking about whether or not they want to stay in the district, whether or not they want to leave the district, I know some of the folks are doing that now, but those things also can change based on what each school's budget looks like. And so I would hope that we are able to put together that process in at least in enough of a fashion to get to that June 30th date so that we are able to approve it and that we don't have the consternation for Treasurer's Office of trying to manage anything past that as best as possible.
Mrs. Weinberg?
And I won't say too much. I will just say that we all know that the budget is very, very important. And I want to just thank everyone who came here today to really voice their concerns and just knowing that we hear you. And I just want, at the end of the day, for the decisions that will be made to make sure that we're putting our students first.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. Ms. Jones?
Yes, thank you. I concur with everything that's been said, and what resonates with me is Vice President Craig. I'm sorry, I don't feel well. Forgive me, I don't feel well. Comments about delaying it beyond June. I believe we have some great folks working on that finance committee. And I have full confidence that whatever, and I know Eve likes this, but whatever recommendations come out of there gets presented solidly to the board. It has been discussed. Okay, so I appreciate the hard work that goes into it. I also appreciate the concern that I hear, and I agree with Ms. Weinberg that we do hear those concerns. I look forward to us passing a budget in June, but I do believe that there are still major areas that have to be addressed. I look forward to the Finance Committee helping us with that in conjunction with the administration.
Thank you, Member Jones. I have not gone. Did you go yet, Dr. Moffitt? Go ahead.
And I'll be brief. And I do want to also share that we are listening, because I just don't think, I cannot hear what I've heard and not be moved, me. So I want to pass a budget by June 30th. To my Vice President Craig's point, he wants to get things done, and I agree with that, to him and Board Member Morosky. But I also want to be responsible. And so I am concerned that I hear people telling me that they are just now hearing that their jobs are not going to be, that their jobs are going to be eliminated. And I hear what you say. So there's a disconnect there. And so I do have some questions regarding ESSER, but I also have concerns that people are not, somewhere there's a break somewhere, that we're discussing things that people are just now hearing about, and it sounds as if those decisions, some of these decisions, they're being told are finite and they're definite, and that we haven't approved the budget. So there's some disconnects here to me that I think we need to significantly look at. And while I would like to be, I want to be quick, because I think that we should be, but also I think that we owe it to people who for whatever reason, just heard this a month ago, we owe them more respect to pause if we need to. So I'm just going to leave that right there.
Thank you, Board Member Moffett. I think I've not gone yet, then we'll go back to Ms. Bolden. I wanted to say how much I appreciated Vice President Craig's formulation of there being a cost to delaying the budget. That's a more effective way of saying what I was going to say. I think there are really important issues for us to work through over the next several months. I believe in the ability of this group and the administration to work through all of those issues deeply and carefully. And my hope is that we can keep that June 30th deadline. Obviously, I'm amenable to whatever we need to do, but my hope is that we can keep that June 30th timeline. Member Bolton.
Thank you. And I think everybody's right from their perspective. Okay, and that's the issue. I can throw in the towel on the 90-day delay, but if we don't do, I think, what the President Sellers is suggesting and take a pause now, we're not going to be ready in June 30th without a whole hullabaloo, because we have unsettled issues in our schools and among our union groups. If March and April are the time for us to dig in and figure out, and this is the time that the administration is transitioning from the school piece to the central office piece, I think a pause is well advised. And I believe, too, that we, the 7 up here, have an obligation to represent not only the administration, but also our union groups, our staff, our families, our community, our taxpayers. This is a huge, important budget decision we're ready to make. But I'll give you an example for finance. The train has left the station. These people came here tonight and last week thinking that somehow we had endorsed all this. The board hasn't seen it. So, and it's not that necessarily that we should have. But because things happened in a timeline that gave the impression, maybe it's just old school CPS, gave the impression that everything was done, fixed, and moving it on, and that's it, that caused a hullabaloo that we didn't need in a year that we have reopeners, in a year that we have too many other issues to address as reasonable board members. So I'm ready to throw in the towel on the 90-day piece. But I will tell you, if we don't take a pause right now and we have some sense of transition and acceptance and board involvement to wrap up the school before we go to central office and also answer some of these great big questions that the superintendent and the treasurer and the community and the unions have raised far more than they have before. Real big changing stuff. Take the time now and we'll be able to pass something by June 30th. But if we don't, we're going to be in the same mess, same sorts of things happening when central office gets done. Let's come together now and let's be respectful to everybody's concerns. And I say, I'm glad Mike did what he did, and I'm glad Julie did what she did. I'm still thinking that 90 days would have been better, but I'm ready to throw the towel in. My dad was a boxer, and that's what you do when you know you've lost the issue. You throw in the towel. But I'm with you. I'll second whatever you're saying, Mike. For the sake of the kids in the district.
Ms. Bolden, I did not mean to cut you off.
No.
You all finished?
You need to.
in that
so
case,
I'm just getting ready.
In that case, Mr. Morosky, you're on.
Yeah, mark that down in the record books. Thank you, President Lindy. And just to Dr. Moffett, I think I don't know that if I made myself as clear as I wanted to, because you and I are on the same page. So when I was saying June 30th, Ms. Bolden said it better than I did too, I think. My point was I think a pause is going to make it possible for us to get to June 30th. I was aligned with 90-day waiver. I got in some hot water a few years back when I really pushed for a 90-day waiver, and some people didn't like it. So I'm all about a 90-day waiver if we got to do it. I don't think we have to now, but I do think we have. So that's kind of where I was getting at. But I do think it's warranted. There are, some folks that I don't know if they even have a clear idea what the surplus positions are yet. That's concerning. It's not just CFT. It's our other, collective bargaining groups that may or may not be quite as vocal. We have many of them. AFSCME to name one of our larger ones. So, I don't know. I would be prepared as a point of procedure to move that we pause, if that's okay. Unless we just can agree that we are going to pause, but I'm prepared to move that we pause. I don't have a timeline set in front of me, but I do think these wounds need to heal to pass a budget on June 30th, because that is important to me. And I don't know that they will organically.
Thank you, Mr. Morawski. I think, normally when we have something in board matters is to discuss an issue and we can have a vote at a future meeting. Unusual, I think, to have a vote on something if we have a resolution or something earlier. There's nothing that would prevent that. It's just a little bit different from what's normal.
Mm-hmm. I'm fine with being unusual.
The administration want to share a perspective at all?
It is not necessary to decide whether to do a 90-day resolution now. You can make that decision on June 26th, right? So June 26th is the last board meeting in June. I have to file an approved resolution with the Hamilton County Budget Commission by June 30. Whether that's a full year's resolution or a 90-day resolution, we can decide then. My concern is if we decide now, we're going to be faced with even a bigger problem later. And so
I'm not talking about I'm not talking about a 90-day resolution or a 90-day waiver.
That's what Board Member Bolton was recommending.
I was simply piggybacking off of Board Member Bolton and taking a pause to heal up some of these wounds now, get some clear communication to the units on what the surpluses are, et cetera, before to E's point, we bring it back here. I'm with you. I don't want the 90-day either. But I think we just need to take a breath. And I don't know if that needs to be a formal motion, but I'd be prepared to make one if necessary so that we do take a breath.
But I think we can do that. I also know the superintendent wanted to share a perspective.
So I think, and thank you for the feedback, a couple of things, and there are a lot of things that, come out during these meetings, and there's information that's not necessarily shared in the background, and I think that we all know that. We have an upcoming meeting scheduled already with CFT to talk about some of the concerns. This will actually be our second one. We did the first one at the beginning of the process in terms of looking at positions. And I was the first to say, and I've shared it with my team, I shared it very publicly with CFT as well, that the process was disjointed. Collectively, it really was. And so we've worked through making sure that we don't have those disconnections as we move forward. I do hear the feedback in terms of the other unions because we have not had conversations with the other unions, nor, as I understand, has it been the practice during the budget time to do that ahead of time. So knowing that there is the kind of interest and energy around this particular budget, I think some of that comes from Board Member Bolton sharing very, very openly that it is a transformative budget. I think that has a more interest in what's happening in the budget. So I definitely think that that's something that we can do and we can set up with those unions so that we are able to go through and review where we are, what the recommendations are, and where those recommendations came from. Even those recommendations, however, have come from projections for the most part. And so making sure that there's clarity around that. Some of the information that we hear is not necessarily the way that it actually rolls out. So, for example, itinerant positions, for example, are staffed at the central office level. So itinerant positions mean that they are members of the district office, but they are assigned to schools to go out and provide service, like we talked about Pam tonight. So I think that there is a space for us not to do an either or, but to do a both and that gives us an opportunity to schedule the time with the teams, listen to what their feedback is, give the response for what that feedback looks like, and any resolutions we can come to, as I shared with with our CFT president prior to even knowing that all of this was happening tonight. Ultimately, for me, it's getting to the services that we need for the students. So wherever we feel that those positions should reside, honestly, I can't say that it matters to me that much one way or the other. My concern is the work that has to happen to improve our graduation rate and to improve our attendance rate at the level that we need to do the work. So definitely open. I already shared that, like I said before, I knew that we were having all of the feedback that was happening tonight. So I think that I see a space where we can do both and still allow us to move forward and still bring back to you those recommendations that would get us, get the ball down the road when it comes to getting to the balanced budget at the timeline that we're looking for.
Great. And I think, and then I'll be quiet, but I mean, I do think, and what I hear, not to be too bold or anything, is that everybody is talking about what's best for the students. And we have a lot of new people and different things and communicate. It's a massive bureaucracy. So again, if we can, I think all agree, ourselves included, and Ms. Bolton reference, more board member input, I think early on in the process, so it doesn't get, to the point, to Jen, who remembers that COVID stuff at the end, where all of a sudden we're passing 90-day or extensions. We don't want to be there. I think we all take a breath, step back a little bit. Good enough for me. I think that would probably be a good idea.
Thanks, Mr. Moraski. Ms. Bolton.
Yes, I maintain that a pause is still needed, and I think some increased and deeper board involvement would be needed in these months. I think the pause is the wisest thing to do, and I'll remind the board members that not only do we have to worry about the kids and worry about staff and worry about our collective bargaining members in our 6 unions, there has been a tremendous uproar in our schools. We have never received this amount of, and part of it I think is probably good, because maybe there's great change coming. I'm not even saying it's always bad that everybody's concerned, but I think to be respectful to the people that we have to be respectful to and are obligated to report to, I think we take a pause, however it gets designed among the unions and the administration and the board and whatever. I think we need a pause. I feel very strongly about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Bolton. I know that also within budget, I'm not sure whether we should move there right now or not yet, so I'm open. But I know that Dr. Moffat had another set of questions you also wanted to ask around budget.
I did. So, and again, I have 4 questions. I'm gonna try to be quick for the administration and the treasurer. And I asked these questions in the framework of how does it impact student learning? How does it increase student outcomes? So what positions for next year that are being eliminated are due to ESSER funding's ending? And what positions would end in 2025 if we were to keep them for this upcoming year?
So I think for just full clarity and transparency, ESSER funding has to be funded and completely done by June 30th of 2024, which is this upcoming school year. And then all the funds have to be paid out by October of that same year. September, of that same year. So we're talking about 1 school year. We're not talking about 2 school years. So that would be the first. I think the one position right now in terms of that's been funded out of ESSER that we have not recommended that we continue to fund out of ESSER has been as I shared previously, has been the elementary reading specialist. So just to add a little more clarity to that role. In the district, we've had reading specialists and math specialists for a period of time. We've talked about the data that has supported or lack thereof for the reading and math specialists. We started by selecting a data point. The district started by selecting a data point, and if a school's proficiency was below that data point, then they received a third grade reading specialist. I'm just giving the grade levels because that's the way that it was assigned. Now, what the work they did in school buildings may have looked different, but that's how it was assigned. The same held true for math. So if it was below a particular level of proficiency, they were given a math specialist as well. When ESSER funds came, so that's two positions that are what we would consider not teachers of record, because they don't have students that are directly attached to them for the classroom. So those would be two. When we received ESSER funds, there was an additional reading specialist that was added to all K-3 schools. So now that's 3 specialists that are teachers, that fully released teachers that are not having students assigned to them, but that are supporting students in small group. There were additional schools, not as many, only about 6 in terms of this particular number, but there were additional schools that, depending on the performance for 6th grade, there was also an additional specialist that was assigned. So while we had about 6 schools that had 4 either reading or math specialists assigned to them, we had several schools that have more than 2 reading or math specialists fully released that are assigned to them as well. So when we think about that, aside from the funding part of it, we're also talking about giving students an additional layer of support, which is great. But in many instances, we're also dealing with vacancies in those very same schools and sometimes across the district, because we have individuals that are out of classrooms in terms of being able to support students. So in some instances, you have students that are not getting tier 1 instruction, which is by having a regular teacher, a classroom teacher in the classroom, and other students that are receiving tier 2 instruction. And so that's conversation that we've had in a market where we're dealing with a national teacher shortage. That also becomes something that exacerbates the shortage that we have for teachers in classrooms. So the recommendation for this year has gone back to still having a reading specialist, but not funding from ESSER the additional, I believe it was 40. I can get each elementary school had one. But the K-3 reading specialists that were put in the school building. Right now, that's been that's the only position I believe that was funded. Oh, that was one. The other one was the school community coordinators, which we talked about earlier. That was one of the positions that I actually walked into. It was shared that position was being delimited. At the time that it was shared with me, I shared just a moment ago what my response was to that. I then sent an email to all of the principals, making them aware of it. And the human resources team that was here at that time sent individual notices to the staff members. So that would be the other position that was in that category.
And they were funded by ESSER.
Yes.
But they've been eliminated.
As the resource coordinator function grew, we realized that we were duplicating those roles with the school community coordinators. So when Superintendent Wright came on board, we wanted to extend another year of funding so that there could be transitionary time.
Okay. So, but they were funded by ESSER previously, and now, oh no, they weren't.
No, they were funded by the general fund previously. We moved them to ESSER so that we could fund them for one more year.
Okay. Question 2, are positions that you're proposing or the new positions that you're proposing being eliminated or reassigned? Specialist, the attendance specialist, and the other position, because we had people. The 3 new positions that you were proposing are the people that are currently doing those types of roles, because we have some that are currently doing those types of things, or we don't. Are those positions being eliminated? Or are they being reassigned? The people that are doing attendance now, and I think I'd asked about a budget before, and we didn't have that number.
Thank you. So they're not. I think the question right now from CFT is whether or not the position is too synonymous to the social work position for attendance and 2 synonymous to the school counselor position for a graduation specialist. So those positions are not being eliminated. As I shared a few earlier, that we have, actually we're in the surplus of 4 positions. I say surplus, additional 4 positions for school counselors based on projections. And then for the school social workers, I do believe that there was a reduction of 2. One of them was funded halfway through the year last year, and the other one was just because of projections, both of which, and I shared once I realized about the school counselors, that we would look back at those because one of them is in one of our largest schools. And so we want to make sure that there is not a break in services when it comes to that. So we'll look back at those as well. But there is not a recommendation to remove positions for that purpose.
Okay. My next question is, we had a question about the retirees, and I sent it to you. The one retiree is due to retire in September, but her job is being eliminated. What is the number of anticipated retirees impacted by jobs that are abolished in June and their retirement is set to be in the fall?
So the first one that I know about is the one that you emailed to me. I have asked staff to pull the additional, just the positions, because our goal, as I shared earlier, is to try to find other positions in the district that individuals could report to. So for example, when we talked about this position last year, and that was actually with our HR staff that's not here now. So that was last school year when I first got here. There were about 3 different types of positions in the district that individuals that were currently in those roles, and I want to say it may have been 12 or 13 at the time, that were in those roles that they would be qualified for based on the job description. So that we looked at those positions to determine if this position was not here, what else could we recommend for those individuals in the district? So we're still working on that particular part to get those numbers. In a case like one you sent the day where it's a recommendation for the position to be delimited, and the person actually is set to retire, I think 10 days after that, so they wouldn't be able to go into a new position. I was able to follow up with staff and find out and determine that there has been some historical perspective to do some extension work with those positions so that they get those last 10 days, work through something through HR where there could be some information around leave and those kinds of things, so they are still able to retire at the appropriate time.
Okay. And then my last question is, we had discipline information shared on February 22nd. Can you share what type of guidance is given to schools to make disciplinary decisions?
Give me a little bit more.
So we had some discipline data, like so many kids are going, so many students are, the demographic of students that are receiving discipline, being displaced from school. Is there any guidance? What type of guidance is given to schools to be able to create that data? So,
So for clarification, as I shared with the board after that particular instance, and I think that was in, I don't remember if it was ad hoc finance or policy, but one of those meetings where it came up, that particular reference was in reference to the ACLU study that was done that we had addressed already as a board, and as an administration, we'd already addressed that, and the board was aware. In terms of overall guidance, however, we have a code of conduct that we are expected to abide by. In terms of the code of conduct, I think I've shared pretty openly that there's work that needs to happen in terms of the code, and there's additional feedback that needs to go into the code as we're thinking about where we are and determining next steps. In terms of transition, when I started in the district, that was one of the areas that we were already in the middle of. So there is not a lot of opportunity to do different at that point around what we're thinking about in terms of discipline, how we're looking at thinking about discipline differently, or even what we're doing around professional development. So those would be things that we are looking at now as we get ready to go into next school year. So that's one of the reasons that I shared earlier that, outside of working with the individuals that are in ALC, which is our in-school suspension program, when students are removed from class, they go to school initially before they go to the Promise Center. Outside of continuing professional development opportunities with them, there has not been a large-scale focus on that right now from me or my administration. What we have done, however, is as a part of our RFP for this year. In terms of professional development, restorative practices is one of those areas that we have done an RFP around so that we really can do some extensive work around classroom management and how that relates to restorative practices. A lot of what we see in terms of data are level one infractions, and many level one infractions are also classroom management concerns. And so how are we able to provide our teachers the right kind of professional development, really get to the core? There are some students that it may be necessary to remove, but we want to make certain that we're removing those students that really need to be removed because we have an alignment for what that looks like. So that's something that we'll see moving forward. It's not just for teachers, though. In terms of restorative practices, it's across the school. So we'll start with administration, principals, assistant principals, teachers, everyone that touches students, as well as looking at how we're doing that work, in our support staff. It's also in schools. And then the second part of that, which likely wouldn't start until next year, would be around those that we're contracting to come into our school building to work with students, because all of them need to know the same language. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Moffitt and Superintendent. Any other questions, Dr. Moffitt, on the budget piece? Other board members with questions or comments about budget? Okay, for the Student Achievement Committee of the Whole work plan, we're going to hear from Board Member Jones.
Yes, thank you. My board colleagues may remember at our last the CAL meeting, Student Achievement CAL meeting, I presented a draft of the work plan for this year, and I received one suggested edit, which I did incorporate, and that was in the board approved changing the title. So I come back tonight with a final plan, and I intend to put a motion on the floor to approve. I do understand that there may be some additional questions, so I'll put the motion on the floor and then we can discuss. I did want to add that I saw some grammatical errors, so I cleaned that up a little bit, and it's ready to go pending approval of the board. So I'd like to formally move that we accept the work plan as presented.
Thank you, Board Member Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vice President Craig. Any discussion on the proposed final Student Achievement Committee of the Whole, Student Achievement and District Performance Committee of the Whole work plan? I got it. Mrs. Weinberg.
I just had a couple of questions as I was looking on the calendar in terms of what the topics, and I see that you put here a health and safety oversight. I know that there are a couple of topics that are the same, and I would be okay with actually having them repeated in health and safety. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that the goal would be to still keep them on there.
Okay. Yeah. As I recall, in health and safety, we did the work plan.
Yes.
Right. And those items, those topics were already on that work plan. Mm-hmm. I also heard in conversations with the full board that there were some things that overlapped. Mm-hmm. There were some topics that overlapped. And so the recommendation is not remove it from health and safety, but to leave it there to provide some guidance and oversight of that, share whatever information with the committee of the whole. Superintendent would be prepared to present reports and data to the committee of the whole as needed. So that's why I left it there. Maybe the term oversight, I don't know.
No, that's fine. No, it's fine. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Board Member Weinberg, and thank you, Board Member Jones. Any other questions? Dr. Moffitt.
So I have some questions, and I did kind of lightweight discuss this with Board Member Jones, but I have some concerns because in looking at Board Policy 0150 under our organization, it has responsibilities as Student Achievement and District Instructional Performance Committee, and we did update the title, and I think that's great. But it has some responsibilities that are missing. So I don't know if everybody has it, but on page 4 of 7, under that policy, it says review proposals and issues relating to the program of study. I'm just going to read the first line. Review reports and studies about the following curriculum and instruction issues, matters relating to system accountability, assessment of educational progress, curriculum review, co-curricular and extracurricular programs, student attendance, I didn't see that in the new work plan. It also has under number 3, receive reports and studies about the following human resource issues, the hiring process, personnel initiatives, including but not limited to recruiting new staff, ethical and legal issues affecting personnel matters, professional development, and EEOC compliance. I didn't see that. And then lastly, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are, well, 5, 6, and 7 are not quite there that way. Let me read them. It says present issues from the community that impact our students' ability to reach their full potential. I didn't see it that way. Discuss opportunities for expanding partnerships. Monitor the fair and equitable use of goods and services within the Student Achievement Committee's responsibilities. And then the last one is there. Additionally, I will say discipline is under health and safety oversight, but it's not in here. So I'm assuming that you're talking about adding discipline to health and safety, but discipline is not currently under health and safety. So I just have some concerns that we took the title, we took some of the responsibilities, and we added the rest of the title, but we didn't add all of the other responsibilities. Are we not wanting to do that, or are we just saying that the student achievement is now something different?
Okay, I'll try to answer the best that I can.
Would you like my paper?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
And if I miss something, you can remind me. First of all, it was my understanding that we were not repeating the old Student Achievement Committee, that we were doing something different.
Okay.
In giving the superintendent the responsibility for providing the oversight of the committee. So that's what I tried to do. And those of you who know me know I like to be concise. I don't like details. So a lot of what was in those policies were the details for every single category or topic. So for each topic in the old bylaws and our bylaws, there was a topic, and then there was all these expectations. And what I did is pulled it together. It's in here under the responsibilities. It may not encompass verbatim what you read, but it is there. So I will say that human resources, regarding the topic of human resources, it is documented in the overarching goal. It says the committee will review, discuss, and make recommendations on programs of study, curriculum, human resources, health and safety concerns, progress toward equity, and other related matters of relevance that impact student outcomes. I do agree with you that it didn't get on the calendar. Okay. So I did see that, and we can make that change that would get on there. It also dawned on me that when we were talking about the superintendent's performance review, in her performance review, there's a performance area for organizational management, and human resources is the measure for that. So I think given that, I think we're okay, we're safe, because she will be responsible for giving that information to us, which includes data, everything that you just said. And we're happy to monitor that, and people can ask for information as it's needed and whatever. So I'm saying that to say I think we did cover that. There's also regarding the statement around community. Under committee members' responsibilities, the superintendent is a member, board members are members, and the treasurer. And under each one of those categories, it says engages community members and organizations, students, and other key constituent groups around responsibilities of the committee as related to specific topics. So that was the community engagement piece.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, the part that's missing, and again, direct me to it if I'm missing it. I don't see monitor the fair and equitable use of goods and services, discuss opportunities for expanding partnerships, present issues from the community. Unless you're talking about the community piece being there, that might be covered.
So you're saying goods and services.
It says, number 7, monitor the fair and equitable use of goods and services within the Student Achievement Committee's responsibilities. It says, discuss opportunities for expanding partnerships that will positively impact students, families, schools, and the community. present issues from the community that impact our students' ability to reach their full potential and discuss how those issues can be addressed. Now that I can kind of see that.
Okay. I didn't incorporate verbatim what the old one said. However, if the full board wants us to edit that, that's fine. We'll go with that. I wasn't recommending that. If the question is, where does that particular topic lie, then maybe that's a discussion we need to have. Does it lie under student achievement? Is it somewhere else? I personally see that maybe as a finance and budget or whatever kind of concern. But I'll do whatever the full board wants us to do with that.
Thank you very much, Board Member Jones and Dr. Moffitt. I think there are a couple of things happening in parallel, and we could make any number of decisions, but I think there's also this bylaw review that's taking place. So there's also this bylaw review that is taking place. So a lot of the committee scopes are going to get updated. It doesn't surprise me at all that there might be some things that are in our current bylaws and might not be in our future Student Achievement District Performance Committee, the whole work plan. Got to be kind of impressed that I got that whole thing right there, because we're just in the process of making these changes and it takes a while to work through the system. I think what I would propose is if there's an amendment that somebody would like to offer, they can offer an amendment. We work through the process. We vote on that amendment. We vote on the motion. And we just use that procedure to move forward. So Dr. Moffitt, would you like to offer an amendment?
So I just would like to add those things or at least have them clearly differentiated. I just think they need to be, we said district performance. That's the new name of the committee. It is called district instructional performance. And I think that those things fall under that. They fell under that before. And while I understand that we're trying to restructure, I'm not saying that it has to be every little thing. And I like how you were very succinct, but I think some of those things need that clarity. That's just me. And I don't know where partnerships failed before. I think it's probably in there additionally, but I think that some of those community issues are specifically what the board should be doing with regard to community involvement and engagement. So I'm happy to have those additions just added. It doesn't have to be spelled out.
Yeah, so that's the proposed amendment. And you don't have to read the whole language. You can just like the titles of the different sections swiftly that you would add.
Well, they actually aren't sections. That's why I'm a little confused because it's not, they're not separate sections as Board Member Jones described. And that's why I asked, did you want to see this? Because they're just items underneath what the committee does. It's not an entire section. It's just the sentence that I shared. Discuss opportunities for expanding partnerships that will positively impact students, families, schools, and the community. That's the responsibility. Monitor the fair and equitable use of goods and services within the committee. Present issues from the community that impact our students' ability to reach their full potential and discuss how those issues can be addressed. To me, that's a student achievement issue. Let's see, the other one says receive reports and studies about the following human resource issues. Now that does have things underneath them and it's a subject, but that's just the line item. Receive reports and studies about the following curriculum instructions. And I agree that that's there, but I just thought those other things should be added as well.
That's helpful. And so I was taking notes as you went. I counted 4 things. One is this report on partnerships. Another is monitoring the use of goods. The third is community issues that come to the fore. And the fourth is HR reports. And so I'm hearing a motion to amend the proposed work report to include those 4 items. Mm-hmm. And so I think the question would be to the motion maker, is that a friendly amendment or should we vote on it? Either one is fine.
That's fine, and I'm okay with that. Would it suffice to include a statement in the overarching goals?
Sure.
Okay.
I just want them to be
mentioned. Can do that.
And I'm going to pass this to you so you can see what I'm looking at. Because I think you're right when you said it's already there. It could just be adding those items there.
Right. I also want to remind the group, we had already changed the title.
Yeah.
to Student Achievement Committee of the Whole, and then we changed it again. So,
I got you.
Okay. Thank you.
So before we totally leave this, we'll go to Mrs. Weinberg next. Board Member Jones, I think 2 options. One is we could vote on an amended work plan tonight. I think option 2, you could take this do whatever you recommend with it to have an updated proposal for next time. Either one, I think, would work fine.
I would prefer the second.
The second.
Give me time because I also want to talk to the superintendent.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Weber.
Yes, can you just repeat the 4 things again? Partnership.
It's written here. I got it here. You want me to read
Yes,
it?
please. There was just 4 things. I think President Lindy said it very well.
I said
Go ahead.
partnerships, use of goods, community issues, HR reports.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on Student Achievement Committee of the Whole work plan? Okay, I know we have at least one inquiry or update from Mr. Craig. Sorry, just kidding. We have Superintendent.
I just want to go back if we can for a second, because I don't think that we came to closure on the recommendation on the budget. And I want to make sure that we're able to do that so that we're all singing from the same sheet of music. So I thought that we could do both at the same time. And what we had scheduled right now was that we would open up for all of the training processes for the budget for the central office staff on March the 13th, with the due date of March the 31st. We will propose that we, in terms of halt, because I think I heard that across the board from several of the board members, we just didn't come back to it. In terms of halt, I think that we can halt for the month of March. Even if we do the training for the staff still needs to be trained on the information, how to do the input. And then that gives us the rest of March to meet with our individual unions, to have any other conversation that we need to have with the unions, to answer any questions that they have, and to provide the board an update on what those conversations have been and any interaction that we need from board members around that, such that we would then back up the timeline for the district office budgets to the end of April versus the end of March. Now, that'll cause us to have to work a bit more to make sure that we are bringing recommendations for a balanced budget to you by May, that then gives you the opportunity to review that and still have the level of lobbying that may go along with the budget, but it still may give us an opportunity to get to approvals by June 30th. So that just so that we can come back and codify that, because what I don't want to do is move forward and we're not connected as a board and superintendent team on that's what we're looking to do. So if the both and is not the will of the board, i.e. we can continue what we're doing on the other side, we can schedule time to meet with the unions, we can continue the work that we're doing in terms of the district, the central office staff and their recommendations, so that we can collapse all of those together so that we're able to begin those conversations in April, then giving us April and May, so to speak, to really move through it. If that is not acceptable, or that's not the will of the board, and the will of the board is for a complete stop, then those would be the timelines that I would recommend. So if I could just get feedback on that, so the treasurer and I really have some direction on where we go next.
Thank you very much for the question, Superintendent. I'll just invite any board member who'd like to weigh in on the superintendent's proposal around March and April.
I think if it is a pause, not a full stop, I think that makes sense. March we're coming into spring break. I think it's very important that you meet and your team meet with the unions that and their representatives. I think it's also very important that there be some very deep level conversations between the administration team and our superintendent and treasurer and the board, because we can't be out here having people assume that we've decided something that we've never seen. That can't happen. And I think I can live with a pause, but I understand you don't want to do a full stop. But that also means, though, that what has transpired until now is not, as it's been presented to many people, that's it. And it's been because in the schools, there is great concern about all of this. So I don't know how we define the status as to what's been accomplished or not accomplished. That's the thing that has to be defined, and maybe a smaller group can help define what that means. But I can live with a pause instead of a full stop as long as there's a dialogue with the unions and the schools understand that this has not yet been written in stone, which is what many of them have been told. And we are not informed as well as we should be. And I think that's just because this is very monumental.
Yeah.
It's nobody's fault. It's nobody's blame. It's nobody's misapplication of anything. This is big. And indeed, the process wasn't big enough for the bigness of it. And I think we can accomplish that in March if we're talking and people understand. But somebody has to define what that means to where the people already think it's over. Because to our way of thinking, it's not over.
Thank you, Board Member Bolton, Mr. Morosky, and then I think Vice President Craig.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that too. And the only thing I would add is I'm glad, Superintendent, that you brought this back up. So when I stepped out and I came back and we were on to the whatever the name of that committee is now. I was like, are we gonna? I wonder if we're gonna talk. I thought maybe something got wrapped up when I was gone. So I appreciate you bringing it back up. I'll just say what Ms. Bolton said, but a different way. The expectation, I think, at least for me, is that in doing this, which makes sense to me, I think is sound procedure, in doing this, what this also means, and I think it's important for people to hear this, at least this is my perspective, is that some of the things we've discussed at this point could change. Like some of the things, the way Ms. Bolton worded it was sort of set in stone. They weren't and aren't, and so some things could change, and we could, at the end of March, know what surpluses might exist, or et cetera, or having full complements for different positions. And to your point, Superintendent, the work getting done is the most important part. And what does that mean? And to that end, I think that's also yet another way of saying this is not a set in stone piece. Take the pause and let's move forward. And I think I'm okay with it too.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Vice President Craig.
So I wanted to just make sure I was and clarify a couple of things that I was hearing you say. And so I think what you were describing is essentially there are some administrative processes that had to still be trained on and still be done in order for anything to be done, period.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those things, we're going to continue to do the training so that folks know how to turn the spigot on once we are ready to have that full process start. But that in April is when we would start with the central office review for their budget, as well as then also still having the conversations throughout March with the unions and with others. And I think if that's the case, I think that makes total sense, because there's no way we would get to May having the conversation, or even June, if folks are not having any education on what their input process looks like, what we need to do for that aspect. I think and if that's the case, I think my thought on that is just that I think it's important that we do clarify, and I think, again, we can do a lot of conversations with regards to how we talk to the community and how the community understands budget process works. I think one of the things that frustrates me a lot is that everyone says it as though the budget is just something that's handed to every school without schools having a process in that budget process. They do. And that's something that I think, again, is about, in some ways, also educating and talking about what we've done. And that was one of the things we did do in budget, finance, and growth, is we did have the conversation a little bit more about that actual process, the steps in place, the appeals process, and those types of things, which I think is part of why, to Board Member Bolton's point, some folks don't know all those intricate details of what happens, and they're given information as if the board's already voted on it, the board's already approved it, this is the end of the day. And so I think having a little time to be able to talk with the unions, having a little time to be able to talk with leadership within the district and folks within the district to really address some of the concerns that come up and understanding better is a good step, so long as we are also preparing ourselves to be able to ramp it up once it's ready to go.
Thank you, Vice President Craig. Any others who've not gone yet? Okay, I had a question. I've not gone yet, and I wanted to just ask Ms. Bolden, when you were referencing things the board members had not seen before, can you just say more about what that was in reference
Staffing
to?
sheets,
What?
staffing sheets for each school. We didn't see it. All these cuts, the results of appeals from all the schools. That would be one. And I'm not saying normally we would, but when indeed we are embarking on this very big, important kind of budget, I want everybody to, once again, think all the things that are going to be happening in the 5 years of this 5-year forecast. This is going to be the superintendent's second budget of her term. She had, she almost, inherited, as she said, much of the other one, the first one. This is a turning point. And that would be an example. And
That's helpful.
That's good. And I would also say to Member Craig's position, I still want to hear the word board in this discussion. This is important. It's not just that it's the unions that have to participate or the schools. And finally, we cannot leave tonight with the schools and the unions, but mostly the schools and the LSDMCs and those folks being in a state of limbo. Because right now they don't know how real what has happened is or how permanent what has happened is. So I think there probably needs to be some, if not discussing it tonight, we are leaving a lot, and I don't know that we can. We might have made matters worse. Who knows? If we don't know, if the folks in the field don't know what the situation is.
Thank you, Ms. Bolden. I think the piece I was going to share, and thank you for answering the question that I had. I think one of the challenges we have is that with all 7 of us, there might be 7 different pictures of what board involvement in a budgeting process looks like. And that's democracy at work. And I think that's everyone should have their perspective on what budget involvement looks like. To the superintendent's recommendation, and I think what Vice President Craig was saying, this both and approach certainly sounds great to me. I think I would like to offer you a chance to respond to the question from Ms. Bolden about what is and is not set.
Yeah. So I think, in having conversation with the treasurer and the rest of the team that have been a part of the budget processes before, and to even what board member Bolton shared, I'm at a bit of an area of gray. And I say that because, there would not be if it hasn't been a part of the previous practice, and it could be that way just because there wasn't a lot of concern about the previous practice or there wasn't a change in what was being done for the previous practice. So maybe there wasn't, a need to discuss it, but I don't know of anything that's ever been shared with me, and you can correct me if I'm incorrect, Treasurer, where we have given or where the board has been provided the projections for the budget, the staffing sheets, individual staffing sheets for the schools, the anticipated pluses or minuses by school. And if so, that just wasn't shared with me, because I think the board knows that if it was clear that was the expectation, then that would have been provided. I was under the impression that was administrative in terms of that. And so that was one of the reasons that it wouldn't have been provided. I think maybe some of the concern, some of which is, I think, just has really been more about the process and the connections, because when we talk about the appeals process is a process that the district had been doing before this administration, that was moving the ball along, trying to get to a balanced budget before it was presented to the board. And so we may have added more data to that, more specificity to that, in terms of looking at how it's done, so that it's not, a decision that the treasurer's office is trying to make on their own, but it wasn't something that was overall shared. So I think that It is great whichever direction we go. I just do think that it's important that we recognize we do move everything else back. And so now it leads me to questions about the conversations that we've had around contracts, for example. That's the next group that will begin to start lobbying the board for contracts that we're not recommending that we continue moving into next year. We don't want to wait to do notification, but now, I'm wondering whether or not we pause in that space because we're not sure that we're going to agree on that or that the board will support that recommendation when it gets to the time of trying to present a complete budget. So anything that you wanted to add?
So the superintendent is correct. I typically, the superintendent, prior superintendents and I would jointly present the status of the budget around mid-March to the board at a very high level. I don't ever recall providing school staffing sheets to board members or even that level. And so this is a lot of this information or these requests are a departure from previous practice. I will remind you that we used ESSER funds several years ago to maintain our staff while everybody around us was laying people off and closing their doors. We've had universities closed, we have businesses closed. The city of Cincinnati laid people off during COVID. We used our funds to hold on to the staff that we had. In the following school year, we spent about somewhere between $4 and $5 million holding on to staff that we would have reduced based on our enrollment. But we knew that COVID was a year of down enrollment and that we were going to recruit those kids back. So we did not want to lay people off and then turn around and rehire them in the next year. So that was a good decision. And but now we're starting to see and then last year, some of our enrollment rebounded, not all of it. In next year's projections, some of our enrollment has at certain grade levels, primary, preschool, and kindergarten. You can see they're starting to rebound, but not necessarily in those middle grades. And so we're starting to see a return back to formulaic student-based staffing, having that kind of an impact. And we like Superintendent Wright said before, the ESSER funds are ending, and I've been talking about this clip for 4 years. And there was a 3-year plan that was adopted that showed a reduction of staff as we progressed forward. This year's budget, ESSER budget, is about $103 million, and I'm going off the top of my head, so don't quote me on all this. But next year's budget for ESSER is down to 70 some million, and 11 million of that's already committed to facility projects. So we can't sustain the same level of spending that we've been spending. This year's general fund budget was $613 million. Next year's target's $575 million. So this year was a high year. It was not a balanced budget to our revenues, but we knew that because we wanted to make it a first-year investment into the new superintendent's administration. We also talked about, Ms. Bolton talked about the preschool expansion going beyond the $15 million revenue. So we have some decisions to make about continuing to expand preschool or how we're going to fund it, because we're going to run out of that cash by 25. And so I'm saying all that to say that we have some tough decisions to make in the budget, and we can't sustain the current spending level that we have. And so having said all that, I'm happy to produce whatever data, reports. We've met with the CFT, and I understand there's a second meeting to go over their concerns. We have in the past done a reconciliation from one school year to the next on position changes, but it's always been at the very high level, not individual schools. And so, but if we can get together and get consensus on what data is appropriate at what level and when, we're happy to do that.
Thank you, Treasurer Wagner. Dr. Moffitt?
So I'm a little, and I know the public is probably tired because we're tired too, but I was always taught, and I shared this before, if it needs our signature, it needs our awareness. And so for me, I hear the ask of include the board. That's what I heard. I don't hear that the board is in the discussion that are pending. And that's kind of what I heard was the request. And the example was given of specifics that we don't know. But I also, and I know last year with regard to the budget, it seemed very, very seamless. It was not this specific. But also last year, I didn't have LSDMC chairs coming to finance committee meetings really, really not wanting to approve school budgets, which is part of the process that they get to do. And we didn't have just one come to a finance committee meeting. We had several. We haven't received just one or two emails from LSDMC chairs that are upset about the pending changes and the process, because they understand what the process is. We've had multiple. To me, that level of increased engagement warrants extra questions that we are within our rights to ask for. So whether or not it's been a previous precedent or not, I don't know if it needs to be on the school level, but I think additional questions can be asked, should be asked to be responsible. I just heard that it was just to include the board in the decisions. I think everybody has heard me say this. I don't like to be embarrassed. I don't like to have people come up to me and tell me things that I don't know. And I've had people come up to me and tell me about positions being cut. We just had people come to a board meeting and say that they didn't know that their positions were being cut, whether or not they were told and maybe they didn't understand, or whether or not they weren't told. That is not just one or two. That is a significant number. What I'm hearing is pause. That's what I'm hearing. And I don't understand why we have to go back to the history. It's just include the board in the conversations that are being had, because you're going to come to us and ask for our approval. So if you come to us and it's a no, that's not good. I would think that we can work together to be innovative and creative and transformative, but then also that we're aware. And so that's what I'm hearing. That's what I heard in Board Member Bolton's request, is that we be included in those discussions, not only just on the high level, but also on any other questions that we may have. But I'm also hearing that from the community, which we have a responsibility to as well.
Thank you, Dr. Moffitt. Ms. Jones.
Okay, I don't even know where to start. I'm writing all over my paper. Sorry, I'm sorry. I don't know where to start. I've written all over my paper, but let me, so I'm just going to put it out there, and my board colleagues, some of them may get upset about it, but it's okay. I'm used to it. Every time we try to approve a budget, we have issues around and challenges around schools that don't want to be cut. They don't want their funding cut. Teachers, we understand that. And I get that. And I care about that. I also know that if we put the detailed stuff that Ms. Bolton is asking for, we're not going to approve. We can pause, but we're not going to be ready to do it, because my opinion is I'll say the word, you all hate to hear me say it, but to me, that's a micromanagement level. I would like to see, I do agree with what I hear board members saying in terms of the board being involved at a very high level discussion about it, meaning I would want to know more of what's going on with the global concerns. How are we taking care of the people who are being impacted by it? Okay, I want to know about that. I've heard the word transformation. Everybody wants transformation, but nobody wants to transform. Okay, and so I would be comfortable with a pause. I want to see the budget approved by the end of June. I do think it's important that the board is better informed so that we can speak competently to our public. I don't want to see us get our hands in it like that. I just don't. I think for me, we have to trust, we can have input as we see this high level information and we can have input and whatever, but ultimately we're going to have to let it go and let the administration do their jobs. And that's transformation. And again, I care about people. I want everybody to be happy, but everybody's not going to be happy. So it's the high level things that I'm concerned that I hope we can get to.
Thank you, Board Member Jones. I'll just echo and agree with what you said. I think there's a lot of different perspective about how involved board members should be, and I share the perspective that you just said. I think there's a limit on what we can and can't accomplish in a meeting at 9:15 on a Monday, but I think some of this is important and we can accomplish tonight. I don't think we're going to be able to accomplish tonight in this meeting what is the picture for how board members are going to be involved in every part of the budgeting process between now and the end of it. I think we should have an answer to that. I don't think we can do that well in this meeting. What I do think we could do is create some additional clarity, and I think we're actually already there, around the proposal that came maybe 15, 20 minutes ago, that folks have been calling a both and. And what I heard in that perspective was that between now and the end of March, there's some additional meetings with unions that will happen, and several additional conversations. That there will be a backing up of the district office budget from end of March to end of April. But that during this March period, some setting the stage trainings, Vice President Craig was mentioning this, Superintendent was mentioning this, could continue. That will not answer every question or every issue that has been raised in this discussion. But I do think it would create some meaningful near-term clarity. And we need to get clarity on those other issues. I would propose we do that in our next meeting. But I don't think we're going to be able to get clarity on all of those things tonight, largely because of the differences in perspectives that we have. Could I hear from people? We'll start with Ms. Bolden, but I would love to hear from everybody whether that's a meaningful way of moving forward for you for tonight's meeting, which is continuing with that both and approach the superintendent was mentioning, but not trying to figure out what role the board's going to play in every part of the budget process between now and its approval.
That's it.
Go ahead, Ms. Bolden.
You again did not mention the board. Now, I don't care if it's 7, I don't care if it's 3, I don't care if it's 1, but I'm not going to have my colleagues and me sit here on June 30th and do an up or down vote on a budget that we are not familiar with at the level that we need to be familiar with or that we have helped guide representing the community. I am trying to make sure we have a budget that we can all vote for on June 30th. But again, you didn't mention in March that there's going to be any discussions between, as there should be. Let's just call it what it really is. People are dealing with a new situation, but more particularly, a transition of culture of, and I'm going to say it, it's a board as well, less collaboration than there has been over a number of decades. And that may be good. It may be bad. We wanted good, decisive leadership, but the reality is we are a collaborative district and we need to work together to reach our conclusions. And I know that the superintendent believes that. I know the treasurer believes that, and we believe it. But if you add to your list that you had, President Lindy, and there is board discussion with this superintendent and the treasurer, I can live with that. But and also some sort of understanding at the school level what's actually happening. Because they've been told by administrators, not the superintendent, by administrators, this is it. And it's done. And I'm just saying, tell the board that it's done.
Thank you, Ms. Bolden. Again, I think that there's going to be disagreement about what the board's role is over the rest of the budget process. I'm not advocating for one answer to that question, nor am I saying that we shouldn't have an answer. I'm simply saying I don't think we'll be able to get to that answer in tonight's meeting. And I want to create enough clarity to move forward.
Take a vote. Should the board be involved or not involved?
Vice President Craig.
So and I just want to maybe get some clarification on this, because my understanding is that a lot of the budget process, as it's already been happening, will continue in the budget, finance, and growth meetings, in that the budget itself that's submitted will come through there first, before it would come to the board. Is that not the process that I understood it to be? And so I think even as we're talking about it in March, and even if we're going through these discussions, that can just be still the continued process that we're dealing with. And those will still be updated within our board meetings as a whole. We do our business meetings. It can still be discussed and where the process we are in, those type of things. I mean, I think to a certain extent, I don't see the board not being involved in that sense of us being able to have the discussions and be able to do it within our meeting structure. I just think it also recognizes that there's a level of involvement that we're probably not going to all agree upon as to what is the appropriate level in this second, right this second. And so I think we're all committed to still using the budget and finance and growth meeting to communicate where the budget is, to communicate the budget targets, communicate the conversations they're having, to work through that part as we did last year, as we will do each year, is my understanding. Is that correct? Or?
Yes, that is correct. And I think that, the treasurer and I kind of have to go back to the drawing board just a bit in terms of finding the best way to present the information so that it gets us not all the way in the weeds, but deeper in the weeds than we have been. Because if I think about the meeting that we had, our Saturday work session, we talked about the budget as a part of the Saturday work session. We talked about each of the individual areas that were areas of focus and what those priorities were. We've talked about those as well in the finance committee. But what I'm hearing at this point is we did not give enough specificity around recommended position changes. And I think that that's what's causing the most of the concern at this point, because, I'm kind of sitting here just kind of thinking back to what I know that we've already presented, which was the same thing that we've reviewed in the, I've attended probably 3, but in the town hall sessions as well around the Ask Jen, which has really been more of the treasurer than me. But we've done that at each level. And so we talked about the priorities. We used the goals and guardrails. We used the overall, the expectations that had been given to us by the board. I think the one thing that we did not do is talk specifically about positions. And I think that if we do that, that might be more. We've even talked about contracts in finance. We've not done it with the whole board, but in finance, we have talked about, contracts that we're not recommending that we continue. We've talked about why, percentages, numbers, so forth and so on, and how we've gotten to that. We were at the phase right now where we wanted to start making contact with those individuals because we also did not want the critique that we waited until May or June to let people know that their contracts were not being extended, because that was a part of the concern when we came in last May. So we're trying to take all the feedback that we're being provided and be responsive to that. But definitely the overall presentation, interaction with the board, I'm open if the board requests an additional meeting for us to just talk about the budget, whatever it is that we need to do to give the board the information that they need to be responsive to what we're hearing from the community, but also understanding that we have school that's opening in August, that we have to be prepared to open as well.
Thank you, Superintendent. So just with all the issues that have gone back and forth, I've lost a little track of exactly where we are, where we need to be. So as a way to try to solve for that, can I ask you, Superintendent, to share where you, as you listen to the board and as you think about not the long-term plan for board engagement for the course of the budget, but the next shortest possible chunk of time, can you share what you're hearing? And then I'd like to start with Mr. Morosky and then go down Mrs. Weinberg, Ms. Jones, Ms. Bolton, Mr. Craig, Dr. Moffitt, myself, and just hear if they're aligned on that. And with that, we'll have many more issues to figure out. You're all welcome back to come to that meeting and hear us talk about it. And then hopefully that'll give us at least some clarity for this evening.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is, one, the timeline that we were working with of trying to get all of the budget pieces done by March the 31st, and then just beginning the discussions with the board, because that was the timeline that we were working with, that we were finishing with the budgets from the central office and then beginning conversations with the board in April and May around the recommendations that we have for the budget, that we would back up a little bit on that and start with giving this month more time to engage with our unions, engage even more with the board around specificity in terms of recommendations or recommendations for changes in positions for this month. Still continuing training that we need to do for central office staff, but back up their timeline to April so that it gives then us the entire month of March to engage with the unions, to do the additional engagement with the union, to do any presentations that we need to do with the board, to do any additional information that we need to provide to the board, and then start with the central office work in April, such that still we would come back with a recommendation to the board of a balanced budget in May. So instead of giving us the 2-month time of April and May with the board, it would give us May with the board, and giving the board May and essentially June to then review, make any additional recommendations, tell us, no, that's not okay, we need to go back to the drawing board and do something else. And then at that time, we determine whether the board chooses to approve the budget by the end of June, or if we look to do a 90-day appropriation. So that's what I think that I'm hearing in terms of the feedback.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. Mr. Moraski.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's been a good discussion. The only thing I would add, and I think we've kind of all danced around it in our own way, is that some notice be given, to the schools that know that this is happening. The people who aren't watching tonight, right? Just sort of like a quick update sort of thing on what's going on would probably be good. But outside that, I think it makes sense to me, everything you said.
Thank you, Mr. Moraski. Mrs. Weinberg.
So I feel like this is round 3 of repeating myself again, but I'm okay with doing so. I just think that we need to be well informed, and whether that is taking the pause that we're talking about and just giving the information. So as one of the duties of a board member, we are to obviously work with the budget and approve the budget, and I feel that we need to be informed in order to do so.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jones.
I'm fully in support of where the superintendent is. The only thing that I can say to sum up what I think about it is that the sooner we get involved with the board around these recommendations and considerations, the better off. That's, the sooner the better.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Ms. Bolden.
I'll second what former Vice President said. I had to get that in tonight, but I'm going to just say a couple words. There's a difference between monitoring and oversight. And there's a difference between being involved and being informed. And that's the role of the board, is that we are supposed to be exercising oversight. And I think representing the community and spending their money, we need to be involved. Finally, I do want to say that we should, before the end of this week, do 2 things. Figure out how the board is going to be involved in this pause. And second, somebody mentioned updating the schools. I don't know what you're going to update them with yet. Is this done or not done?
Thank you, Ms. Bolden. Vice President Craig.
I'll be brief. I think the superintendent's plan sounds good to me.
Thank you, Vice President Craig. Dr. Moffitt.
I think I will definitely echo everything that my other colleagues have said. I just would really implore that the board is informed and a little bit more, at least to be able to give some community perspective. I also feel like, to kind of expand a little bit on what Board Member Moraski said, I feel like something has gone out to people I don't know what it says because we are not shown that information, but something has gone out to people because they're coming in here with, this is happening to me. the LSDMC chairs are coming in with like, no, we were told this. So I don't know what exactly has been told to people, but whatever has been told to the schools, the LSDMC chairs regarding their budget, in addition to their administration and personnel, I don't think we need to see it, but I think that's where I'm thinking the pause needs to be, because people have a definitive opinion that decisions have been made and they're coming to us as the board approved this. I don't even know what they're talking about. So that's the pause that I'm talking about. I don't know what has been passed out by your team, your administrative team, but whatever it is, that's what I'm talking about, getting some pause on.
Okay, so I think, Superintendent, you probably heard some significant overlap and also some differences, but I think we got clarity on the plan, at least for the next chunk of time. Is that accurate?
Correct. And I think what the clarification is schools have been provided a budget timeline. They get a budget timeline every year, and their budgets are due in the system by Friday. And so that's where the budget timeline comes from. But from there, that's how the budgets have then been built to give it back to the board. So that's what the process has been. So I think that is the space that we open up to just share that we're, kind of what came out of the meeting, that we're doing the additional reviews and then backing up their timeline to give more time for the engagement, the involvement, the follow-up, as was requested tonight.
Okay, so in an effort to get folks home before we hit 10 p.m., inquiries and updates this evening. Mr. Craig has one. It's a good one.
But I'll make it short too, so we get out of here. I've already gave the update that I'm attending the Legislative and Policy Conference for Council on Great City Schools. I got a call last Thursday that because two of the current board members, as the liaison for the board, I'm on their now board of whatever for the council, but two of their members of their executive board have recently stepped down from either their positions, either at the boards or in their role as superintendents, and they were both from the state of Ohio. And so in an effort to have someone represent geographically our wonderful state of Ohio here on the executive board, my name was put out there as a nomination. And so at the conference in March 18th through the 21st, I will, and I accepted the nomination, so they'll vote on it and add me to the executive board.
Congratulations, Vice President Craig. That is fantastic. And well-deserved. Any other inquiries or updates? Any assignments? Any announcements or kudos? Ms. Bolton.
I have an assignment to the superintendent and the president of the board to develop some sort of statement as to the board's role during the month of March and April.
Thank you, Member Bolton. As a proposed assignment, we either should be at a consensus with everybody or we should take a vote on it. Can you say it one more time, Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, the assignment to the president of the board and a superintendent to design and outline the role of the board during these 2 months of March and April, which is part of the original timeline, plus is now March is during sort of that pause where there might be additional discussions.
I would offer a amendment, hopefully a friendly one, that it should be for the entire budget cycle, not just March and April.
What was the friendly amendment?
I heard Ms. Bolton say that there should be something that lays out the role of the board in March and April when it comes to budgeting. I was agreeing, and I was saying the budget will also go into May and into June. So shouldn't we have that picture be not just of these first 2 months, but of the whole budget cycle? And I was testing whether that was a friendly amendment or not a friendly amendment.
I can live with that as a friendly amendment. My concern is it can't be a list of how many times we're going to get a presentation.
No, yeah, I'm with you.
Something else. being informed, but I think
Yeah.
that's great.
And I think we
need to do
may,
that.
I think we may need to vote on it because it may be that people disagree about what that should be. And
Yeah,
that's okay. But we got to
absolutely.
find where at least 4 votes are for
the
what
next
that, for
meeting.
the,
Possibly.
I will do my, well, so I think I think that's certainly an important thing that we should do. Objection for me. Any dissent from other board members?
I'm a little confused. I'm sorry. I'm tired and I'm confused as to what the original request was versus what you said.
So
You're saying to include June?
yeah, so Member Bolden offered an assignment. The assignment was to come up with a written description of the board's role in the budget process for March and for April. So I offered a hopefully friendly amendment that we not just do these next 2 months, but that we do the entire budget timeline.
But how is that different from the finance committee? I guess, is that what you're saying? Like the finance committee has the responsibility of the budget, but what she's specifically asking for is the addition of the board in the discussions for March and April to get to a resolution for the normal process. So she's not asking for the normal process, which is already falling underneath the finance committee. She's asking for this particular addition of the board to be in the conversation because the board hasn't been mentioned in all of the other discussions. So what I heard was that she's asking for the board, for clarification of the board's role just in this piece.
Yeah, I don't think I'm disagreeing with you.
Okay, so, but I'm saying why would that be inclusive of the normal timeline for the finance committee?
I think that's a question for Member Bolden.
I think the reason I'm willing to accept the friendly amendment is that it's talking about the full board role rather than necessarily our responsibilities in finance, which are, predetermined and hopefully will also be acted upon. So I think getting the whole board involved throughout and having a written statement and with us voting on it to see where the board really is regarding its interest in involvement, I think is a good idea. So I can live with that. I think you're exactly right about what's the difference, but I think that depending upon what they produce, we'll know.
Does that answer your question, Dr. Moffitt?
A little, because I'm also kind of like, wouldn't that fall under the student achievement conversation? That's also like a full, I mean, I'm not trying to give extra work, but I'm just saying we took that word, those words out, but it could have very well been underneath the cow already to be updated on the board, the budget. Never mind.
I think if people would like to take a vote on it, we can. I also think that we might actually be at consensus, which would be lovely. Okay. Excellent. Any other assignments? No other assignments. Any announcements or kudos? Ms. Jones, followed by Mrs. Weinberg.
Yes, at the last board meeting, I offered kudos to the SCPA students who were named to the honor band at Xavier. And I have since learned that Withrow also was invited and had students who participated in that. So I wanted to give kudos to the Withrow students as well. So in addition, I want to say that the band leader for Withrow was a student of Lee Black. CPS strong. All right.
Thank you very much, Board Member Jones. Mrs. Weinberg.
Yes, I just have a couple of kudos, and hopefully we'll pull it up on the screen. Yes, I have to be fancy, So my first kudos goes out to Hughes High School. I was invited to attend, it's the very first slide, I was invited to attend their Black History program. There was a student who decided to do her report on me, and it was a pleasure to just be able to experience their Black History program in which they had dancing, they had singing, they had poetry, they had their band playing, and it was a great time. And also, board member Moffitt was able to attend as well. So kudos to them. The second slide, I got the opportunity to attend the Grad Cincinnati Donuts and Dollars for Grad Scholars with my two colleagues, Board Member Jones and Board Member Moffitt. It was a great opportunity to see two of our seniors. There was a young gentleman from Riverview There was a young lady from Euler who received scholarships, and they also received an award as well. So it was a great opportunity to see our CPS students achieving and being great. And my last kudos, a couple weeks ago, Board Member Moffitt and myself, we got invited to attend Forever Kings. They had an event in which, in this far picture here, pictured are a couple of our CPS male students who were able to, they created a song. They released a song. It was a student-created song, and also they created a jacket in which I think the young gentleman that's standing in the back row next to me, he was able to create this jacket design. He attends Walnut Hills High School, and it was a great opportunity to just see our young Black males excelling. So kudos to them as well.
I just want to
Any
add
other kudos? Dr. Moffitt.
Thank you. I'm sorry. The owner of Black Owned is a CPS graduate.
Yes.
He graduated from Dater Montessori High School. So that is an awesome, he's got Black Coffee and Black Owned. And so if you go back one slide, Rob, and he's looking for some opportunities to engage students with internships and volunteer opportunities too. And then I just want to also add that Sadie in the middle graduated from Euler and is a Marion Spencer Scholar, and she has an opportunity to go to Tanzania and live in the best dorms at UC. So that is a wonderful accomplishment.
Any other announcements and kudos this evening? I'll go real quick. I wanted to say first, congratulations to the team on a wonderful recruitment event this weekend. Superintendent mentioned that at the beginning, but I'm delighted to see us aggressively recruiting fantastic, talented educators to Cincinnati Public Schools. Second, I wanted to wish everyone a happy Women's History Month, which starts in March. And then lastly, and related to Women's History Month, for any or Jewish or non-Jewish members of our community, I wanted to let everybody know that tonight starts the Jewish holiday of Purim. I wanted to offer a Chag Purim Sameach to all of you. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Purim, among other things, it celebrates courage and it celebrates women's leadership. And I think those are all things that are timely, certainly for myself, and I think for all of us. Are there any other kudos this evening? Without any other business